Yeah, my neighbor is actually the principal of the girls' school.
Ja, je had hem gezegd, hè?
I live between two principals.
Yeah.
Principal of the boys' school, principal of the
Nee,
girls'
dat is een kneppel.
So my kids, she said
Ja,
to my wife,
gezondheid, ja.
if you would know what
Je
they
gaat
want,
jullie gasten.
you would not be happy if your school passed.
welcome everybody on this very auspicious day, or actually days, Yud Shvat and Yud Aleph Shvat, and this very beautiful event for our Anash here in Muncie. So to jump right in, Peschin b'Malchus, and we'll begin with a video of the Rebbe. If we can.
Shvat 1950. The Jewish people lose a champion and prince. But there is a successor. 1 year later, a quiet son-in-law reluctantly agrees to lead his father-in-law's flock. It will not be long before he changes the face of world Jewry. But it is not a task he intends to carry alone. Excerpts from the Rebbe's inaugural Farbrengen in 1951.
Also da kamen Chilukim zwischen dem ersten Jahr noch Istalkes bisle Jacharsmann sei. Was hat die Chilukim seine da bei alle Jiden, bei Anoshim Pschutim und all derer sei. Sehe da bei Gdele Yisrael und all derer seine gestanden in Nazami Nefen. Was Tzadi Gezer bei Kodesh Baruch und Mekayim noch mehr Tzadi Kwa Yochel Mevatel is that ze zechet gehoben ze dem Keach le Yachar hafila histalkes was es agdelem Tzadikim Yeser mibchayehen tot dem Keach af nicht nur as es soll sein Tzadi Gezer a Kodesh Baruch und Mekayim nicht nur as es soll sein a Kodesh Baruch und Gezer und Tzadi Kwa Yochel Mevatel nur denn as soll tonu sein a Shime b'maise Breishis. Das heißt als Chotscha viele se zachen no is Chedesh was af noch Chilukim was demot noch jet beis Chedesh das nicht da i des Bamed Dvorim Amurim was mis amuchrech baze i das nicht to die welche sein im Balabatim al kol hoilom umlehe haben sie die Brere zu stehen in Asami Nefen wie sie gefinnen besser nicht nur für Ravas Hashem, nicht nur für Ravas Atere, und auch viele Epsi besser für Ravas Yisrael, ist auch dort einmal der Wort, wo der Rebbe hat übergesagt, in dem Namen von dem alten Rebben, als Vahafto Lereyacho Komecho, is a Kehle, auf Vahafto es Havaya Lekecho, i bemeile sich bei sie derselber Seder. Aber Schaas me legt dem Dogisch auf Vahafto Lereyacho Komecho, i dos baze nit nit kinstiri so aber hafte es avayele kecho no verkehr dass noch a kela duruf hat mir na tieferen verbund mit hafte es avayele kecho i do in Amerika is a halmal a seder a desche sach willen herren a statement und das Statement da darf gesagt etwas mit achidisch dover mit aini was im Mavel Sarai. Ich bemeile das, ich weiß nicht, das darf Mavel sein Essereien, aber ich will hören ein Statement, oder er habe gesagt, dass er da 3 Sachen, als er da Avas ist Hashem, und so da Avas Atere, und so da Avas Yisro. Und unter die alle 3 Sachen sein in Kule Chad, das ist, man kann nicht voneinander teilen. Zwischen einer haben wir der Zweite. Und am handelt, wie bald das ist Kule Chad, und das ist auch Kule Chad, wie ein Netzem ist eins. Das ist, aber ist dort der Klall, als ein Ingen Atzmi, wenn man halt so schon an ein Teil davon ist, hat demut hat Tefis Kule, als bringt auf Sidis Beshem Baal Shem Tov bringt es auf Beshem Rishenim. Also etzem kishat Tefis b'mikzose hat Tefis bekule. Und wie bald als hat die alle drei Sachen seinen Kule hat, ist in was für Achilek mit Ton chappen, darf man wissen sein, am Chapton alle drei Sachen. Bemele darfen alle wissen, aber schaß man chapt sich on Onavas Hashem, ist das nicht eine Sache, was man kann damit jetzt sein, und man kann sich damit halten, eben mit Tom Mavas Atere und eben mit Tom Mavas Isroel. Sie, also pflegen morgen nach Sieden sollen allein tun, nicht verlassen sich auf den Reben. Allachas kamen wir 20 Menschen wegen der Rebes Hanedem, dass nicht legt sich in Fegelig im Busim und in Mente liegt auf mir Arribe, seien ihr alle frei und kann sich tun, was ihr wollt. Ich meine nicht, was ihr wollt, Chas v'Sholem Dwarim, was eine Motorim. Da dann sich machen a good time mit a ruhigen Leben und die sich hitzig lieb meinen, was sie sein, sich schon horven und sich obtan alle Unionen und jeder Tag wegen Tages Gachne, wie Tages Tinossi und sich tun, was ihr will, so sich ein kleines Fegelig im Busim, keinen nennt von nach und darauf, die alle Schlichtsten, was der Rebbe Tag gegeben und keinen Tag nicht versporen, keine Arbeit. Wir können arbeiten Mittag zusammen, dann kommen wir mit etwas helfen, was die Kinder nicht alle nicht nachhelfen. Aber dass die Schlichtes, was der Rebbe gegeben, jeder von uns, da fähren Peil Mamesh, alle mit Kaim sein, mit seiner Amachevrim, mit seiner Shassagidim von Guf, und mit seiner Amachevrim, Shassagidim von der Neshome. Und es ist doch nicht so, auf einmal zu verlassen, warum das Ayinin, was Hakel bei der Shamayim, Chutz mit ihrer Shamayim, darf ein Poshet allein horven und allein tun. Und dort nicht helfen, was sie mit geben Ksovim und mit Reden und mit Singen und mit sagen Lechaim. Das kann keine Unione mit Mischane sein. Das darf dir allein hapig sein, dem Stuss de Leyumase und dem Koch von Nefesh Abamis und machen der Fuß Stuss die Dusche. Warum der Mischken, der Rebbe einmal gesagt, den er verbringen hat. Der Mischken hat gekonnt, wo ihm mit dem Geld von Yechidim. Und Afal Piken hat gewollt, dass in dem Mischken sollen alle Jiden sich misstativ sein. Und hat er sind in dem Mischken Hagashmi, was gewinnt bis man Hamidbar, und hat er gewinnt in dem Migdash, was David am Melech hat gebuht, hat befehlisch Gewe gewinnt, mit Kol Shevet wie Shevet. Kurz hat gehandelt wegen Asamis Schum, was bei David hat das nicht betroffen. Und er sehr gewinnt beim Reben, beschaß gewollt schreiben, dass er verteilt von Kabbalas Pnei Mashiach, hat gesagt, dass will nicht haben die Minion für sich allein, will David mit haben meine Status von Kol Yisrael. Und hat sagt mit der Arbeit, was man wie man früher gerät, wie steht beim Reden mit Maimer. Als ist sagt, der Arbeit, was man darf machen, die Relis, Baruch Betachtenim, hat da im Peil Mamisch, darf mehr nicht wie Messiaim sein.
Ich komme jetzt Vater, ich habe gehasst, bald auf 40 Minuten und du schabest du, was Papa sein,
Wir haben das als Dr. Freitag, das ist ziemlich spät. Wir haben sicher gewöhnt, zu kriegen Aksariat Kedisch von Ratschewer Goen, was hat geschrieben zum Sehen. Allgemein Sehen. Die Vukovic, Schnass, Harboin, geben mir über dem Reben Schlitte Amatonen. Und das, was ich gewollt nach Vaterstadt. Ja. Nein, mal gut, schon mal wissen, ja, Schäfchen. Und das ist immer das schon. Wissen, ja, Schäfchen. Dat heeft je met z'n zijn zo klein zijn tegen. Oh, meen ik. Dat is een naam daar.
Mensen ook niet. Dat hebben we dat
Dat is het.
יש לנו פה קבוצה של 40 שלקחו על עצמם כל אחד לעשות משהו ב-40 ביידישקייט, לכבוד י' שבט.
הצלחה בשביל כל העניינים האלה. שבוע. הצלחה רבה.
gedruckt van Rebbe 40.000 der neue Bichalel, der Rebbe das hat immer gegeben, aber das dedicated zum Rebbe. Der erste 40.000 betraf den Schnasser Boim.
Ich gebe mal 40.000, bin ich nicht begeben, aber ich gebe mal viel. Bin ich ja begeben.
Das ist Schimmels.
Hier will ich 40. Ich will jetzt 4. Amen.
Maar ganz Maschinen ist gebadet, mehr wie 400 Freunde sind gegangen auf dem Stein und haben sie geschwach.
Das war ein gutes Schluss, mal bitte ja schon für alle Brachis. Und durch so Menschen jeden, was Menschen verlieren, und der Lebste, die Menschen, was sagen, als sagt Brachis für ihn, für die Kinder und die Kindskinder. Dann bitte beschützt. Der Ragatschower Teinit, Aderinien, von Binyan Beis Hamikdash, von Churban Beis Hamikdash, Churban Beis Hamikdash, das Adover Nimshach. Es ist nicht der Pshat, dass der Beis Hamikdash Chorb geworden mit Karge 2000 Jahre zurück. Und von demut hat man an Mavelis Yeshore, bei der Pfarrer kommt Tischebov und die 3 Wochen, bei Kajitze, bei der Bechol Jem, sagt man, dass Sehne in Einu, Mispal alle Giule Vechule, auf eine Sache, was hat getroffen, mit Hecher 1900 Jahren zurück, sagt nein, der Chid, der Churban Beis Hamikdash, ist das Bechol Jem, wo Jem, bemehlet sich von verstandig, was es darf sein, der Geschrei, ad Mose Bechol Jem, wo Jem. Und sagt dass sogar befähigt in Jerusalem. Das steht in Jerusalem, da kol mi, sheli nivna Beis Hamikdash bismane, is kilo chore Beis Hamikdash bismane. Durchgegangen 1900 Jahre, mit noch Jahren Lachlise. Mit bald aber Jem Chamishi Pasche Pinchas. Und schon lachrit vieles Meire. Der Lei nivna Beis Hamikdash darf im Wissen sein, dass es darf sein, der Geschrei, auf der Geilu, Kiilu, Choro, der Jem Chamishi, Pasche Pinchas. Einfach die Pravista verbringen. Und das Jem Geilu, Vechulu, sein Nieden gewinnt geworden in einem Mondmuseum, Nimna, Nimnois. Nimnois, der Basachas. Mit Mondmuseum soll sein, eine Schome beguf. Und wir sagten dabei, Al-Korchach, aber Hatachai. Darf das sein, Al-Korchach. Und dabei ist echt ein Mischwe, was darf ihm mit keinem sein, bis Simchov, Tuv Levov, und schmartem le Nafshi Seichel. Und bejachet im See, darf stehen in Amai mit Bechol Neidecho, bemele nicht, was Al-Korchach, halt sich werden die Nishom in Gut. Und zusammen damit ist mit keinem bis Simchov, Tuv Levov, binden Nishom mit Gut. Nicht Koleis HaNefesh beprägt. Und wie bald das ist noch am Nächten geschrien hat Mose. Und nicht Nächten geschrien hat Mose. Und Kola Yom Shelifni sei geschrien hat Mose. Danach Rachman al-Islam, Chore Beis Hamikdash, heint in der Früh oder heint bei Tag, ist er von verstandig, was es darf sein, der Geschrei hat Mose Yitzre. Bekommen es nicht ein von der Pschätze, dass Loch in Teire. Als in Teire steht, nicht allein Nivna Beis Hamikdash beyond. Ist Kiili Kach wie Kach. Stellt mir sich vor, Bishaas, was Nisra Beis Hamikdash. Und dabei steht da Jid, was ist ein harter Ried, ein steiner Ried mit allein woher. Und seht, was ist der Chore Beis Hamikdash beyond. Wollte also gekehrt der Welt. Sagt Teiras Hemes und Teiras Chaim, ihr Roba Chaim, Kehra Welt heim. Zusammen damit war der Pravis ist Beis Gimel Tammuz, Tosten ist Sorgenkind Tainu, und darf sie von mitnehmen Simcha, Al-Kola, Shona, Kula, soll sein, war Watlas, Aweile, Kirche, Davke, Simcha, und wir tun wo, und Biesa Seis, und Biesa Reis, noch näher von Jid Beis Gimel Tammuz von Pharaonen, der andere haben mich noch nicht übersehen. Aduru, Druva, du Smarbe sein, in Simcha shal Mitzvah, und in Simcha shal Teiro, wird die Simcha Mehare sein, verbrennen die Schireien von dem Golus und wird erreichstellen dem Alef in Golus. Bischaß mich stellt herein a Rufische Leilam, Amitis Amitzis, Shememenu nimmt zu Kolan in Zoi, in dem Wort Gele, wie Golus, wird uns demol der Wort Giula, wo der Wort Ishmeya Sheyikvele Beloschen Akedesh, wird aufgetan die Giula, Nishave, und Niskayim, und sie kommt darauf mit der ganzen Schleimus, der Matla Masorot Fochim, alle dem Mashiach Tzidkenu, beim Heile, Beyameinu, Mamosh, Koomot das Achil, auf dem Ebersten, Bechol, Jem, Jem, Chodesh. Dort der Chi, was mit Schadu, was sich mit Schaiv gewähnt, bis man Schachar bis Amigdash. Danach kommt zu Achi, Chodesh, Bechol, Jem, Vajem, Chodesh. Ab Nebischen, soll Uboin, Bnei, Bischak, Ivatchilo. Und noch mehr, Migdash, Adne, Kennen, Yodecho. Abeis, Amigdash, Nitzchi, Bim Heira, Biameinu, Mamos, Veteke, von Miyad Mamos, du Simchov, Tule, Wov, Bechayim. Samalecho nafshi, Samalecho besori, Ve'yeret Ziyo ve'yoyevni moyi.
It's known, the famous saying that the Rebbe says that by Rabbeim, by Nesiim, by Iraya Yisrael Amitiyim, by true leaders of the Jewish people, when we gaze at a picture of them and we look at a picture of them, they in turn are looking at us. As the Rebbe famously says, like we say by the Beis HaMikdash, that there's lirois and leirois, there's kshem sheba lirois, kachba leirois, to see and to be seen. And so to continue from what we just saw and to set the tone for this evening and what will then continue as a Farbrengen, once we end here in the Tzemach Tzedek, we'll ask Asher Rosenbluth to lead us in a few nigunim. Please help yourself to the food that's set up. And while you do, the pasuk says, "Smach zvulun b'tzeisecha v'yisachar b'yolecha." Before we dwell on the Yisachar part of the evening and all the Farbringing and Divrei Torah, it's important to note the sponsors and those whose commitment made this evening happen. And just to run through them quickly, and if I omit anyone, it's by mistake, and I apologize in advance. But this evening it happened thanks to the various shuls, the Tzemach Tzedek, the Beis Menachem Mendel Lubavitch of Pomona, Beis Menachem, Menashe of Vermont, and is sponsored by LZ Construction, Eli Zisman, by Sima Abinson, as part of Rand Realty BHG, and Dr. and Mrs. Chaim Schild, Avram and Devorah Heyman, Lili Nishmas, Avram Leib Ben Yaakov, Shimon Kroll, and Yosef Shandling in memory of his mother. Those are the sponsors. And those that made this evening possible by virtue of their hard work, their vision, and their commitment, headed by Rabbi Markowitz, Amalei Markowitz, Yena Abinson, Mendel Sandhaus, Hashi Rosenblum, Mendy Glick, another person who contributed immensely in terms of effort but wishes to remain anonymous, Nehemiah Kaplan for the photography, and one picture too many, and Shmuley Niaza for the video and audio. And please join me in expressing our gratitude for them. To get the evening underway, I'm going to ask the Marad Asra, Rabbi Leshes, to greet us with some divrei bracha.
Chaim, Chaim. It's really a great pleasure to see all of us coming together. Today is Ashna Sakel, and we know that Yud Shvat, Yud Aleph Shvat, there are maybe one or two people here which were still in time of the Frierdiker Rebbe, but if not for that, all of us, we are from this generation, and obviously we know that the Rebbe gave us this particular shlichus to finish up the job and to make sure to bring Mashiach Tzidkeinu. 30 years ago, when the Rebbe spoke about Yud Shvat, which was a very special huge Shvat, but this time the Rebbe spoke a lot about the Indian, that the wealth is Dirba Tachtoinim, on the Oilom is Botze Legani, B'meila each one of us have just to put things back to the where they were before, and not that we have to make up 9 Yonim. Therefore it's much easier to do it. And the Rebbe said that what we are learning also from this week Parsha, V'ei B'shalach Paras Ha'om, that after being slaves for hundreds of years, nevertheless, the change was in an instant. It was Mamesh 1 to 3, and the Rebbe said this is what we have to get into our mind and in our heart, that be'emes, the change could be right way. And we don't have to think this will take who knows how long, but this time the Rebbe also spoke about the nuclear weapons. The Rebbe said that we're able to see that you have very powerful kind of neshek, which in the old times was not available, and today it's available, says the Rebbe, because today the world really runs in a different force altogether. And obviously this could be used for inyonim fun sholem, in peace, and not another way around. Izbikir, the Rebbe spoke about it, that we have to put effort into making sure that the world will be really Botze Legani, and doing everything in a very proper way. And Be'emes, this huge Shvat, 30 years ago, Tovshin Memvov, marked a very special Indian in our generation, because the Farbrengen throughout the night was a normal Farbrengen, if you can call it normal. And the next morning, it was something very unusual. The Rebbe was standing in his door with the Satuk of Yom Tov Satuk of Yud Shvat, with a gartel, and the Rebbe gave to everyone which went through a dollar. But this time, people did not know what is going to eventuate it into. But this is what the Rebbe made Yud Shvat, and later on the Rebbe was Mamshich that the Rebbe made that again on Yud Aleph Nisan, on his Yom Huledes, and from that time onwards started the idea of Sundays, every Sunday a dollar, which makes such a big difference in our generation, because so many miracles came out, and so everything was publicly and everything was open, and everybody really felt very strong how we are becoming closer and closer to Mashiach, Mamish, every time Mamish. Is the Chaim, the Ebshe should really help the all of us together in a great unity, as a Kile, really joining all of Panash, all around the world, including the entire Jewish nation, and all of us should really finish wherever have to be done. And like the Rebbe said, that even if we think by ourselves that certain things are not I, but by the time that you will remember that ourselves from the beginning everything was all right, and we have just to recorrect things, which is much easier from to do something from scratch. By the time that you will remember this, it will be much easier to achieve everything which we want to achieve. And like we know that the Rebbe from day one, like we saw before the video, the Rebbe was speaking about it, that all of us, we have to put effort, no chochmes, anoshim, noshim, etaf. And like we know that the Rebbe really said it, the Rebbe meant it, and this is what the Rebbe wants. Is the Chaim, the Rebbe should help that will continue our shliches, and all of us together will be able to see the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, the coming of the Rebbe, and all of us together will be able to go out from Golus right way. L'chaim.
Shkoyach. Shkoyach l'chaim, l'chaim. Please join me in saying l'chaim for the l'chaim. Before we get to our main event, just to share a quick thought on these days. Chazal tell us that Shalosh Matmonios, Yosef HaTzadik hid from the vast treasure that he accumulated. He hid and buried deep 3 Matmonios, 3 different treasures, 2 of which were discovered, and 1 which will be discovered in connection to the coming of Mashiach. Chassidus explains that the meaning, the deeper meaning of this idea of the Shalosh Matmonios is that the spiritual function, one of the key spiritual functions of Yosef HaTzadik was that every Yid has buried deep within them a treasure of Avas Hashem. Yosef gathered all the kesef, that was to be found. And Kesef, Chassidus explains, based on the Pasuk, refers to love to Hashem. And every Jew has this treasure within his neshama, within his soul. And this treasure is made up of three parts. There's the intellect, there's the emotions, and there's the Maisa B'Poel, that part of the neshama that's engaged in practical, tangible Maisa B'Poel. Similarly, we know famously the Rebbe discusses that the Frierdiker Rebbe was a leader, a Nasi, for 3 decades, 30 years. And the Rebbe divides the 30 years into 3 equal parts, each one a decade. That the Frierdiker Rebbe's Nesius was noted for the one string of Mesiras Nefesh that ran through his Nesius, really his life, but particularly his Nesius from beginning to end, even though he dealt with 3 very different sets of circumstances between the first decade and the second decade and the third decade of his leadership. And to succinctly express the Mesiras Nefesh of the Frierdiker Rebbe, who conducted himself in a manner of lechatchila ariber Mesiras Nefesh, that means that there's never entertained any other possibility other than the absolute and firm conviction of Torah, mitzvahs, and Yiddishkeit, of what he was committed to, is expressed in the words that azoi unit andrish, that there was the conviction that it must be so, and there simply is no alternative. And it was this commitment that ran through his Nesius for all the different sets of circumstances, the 3 chalakim of his Nesius. Which means that the Frierdiker Rebbe implanted through his actions this Mesiras Nefesh in the same 3 levels that make up every person, in their Chabad, their intellect, in their Chagas, their emotions, and in their Nehi, in that part of their Neshama that is involved in actual Maisa B'Poel, that all of it should be infused with a spirit and a commitment of absolute Mesiras Nefesh. And begins his work where the Nasi before amended his. So the Frierdiker Rebbe of the Der Hashishi, having brought the Shechina down to the of bringing the Shechina down to our world, and that's what we commemorate and celebrate and live with on Yud Aleph Shvat, Yud Aleph Shebi Yud Aleph, like the Rebbe says, that the Rebbe's work, the Rebbe laid out a goal and an objective and a measure of his work, that his success will be with the actual coming of Mashiach. That Mashiach is also tied into these same 3 aspects of the person's makeup, of a person's neshama. Because we know Mashiach is very much about the intellect. The Yidden will be chachamim gedolim, and malahar et steyas Hashem. We know Mashiach is tied to action, because only then will we fulfill the mitzvahs properly and b'shleimus, like we have not done in thousands of years, kol yeshveh Allah, and some mitzvahs that we never kept, like Ari Miklat. So the actual Kiyum HaMitzvahs will only be when Mashiach will come. And Mashiach is tied to the emotions, because we know in the days of Mashiach, those things that distract us, the kina, the sinna, the tachrus, none of that will play any role in the times of Mashiach, because all the ma'adanim will be mitzuyin kafir and so on. And more importantly, the 3 loves that beat in the heart of every Yid, in the heart of every Chassid, that the Rebbe spoke about in conjunction with Yud Shvat, the Avas Yisrael, and the Avas Hashem, and the Avas HaTorah, which really is the ingredients that bring us to Mashiach, because as we know, the cause of the Galus, and in order to bring Mashiach, Yisrael oisin tshuva, miyad hein nigolin, tshuva is the recognition that we want to be connected to Hashem, Avas Hashem, and that the way to be connected to Him is through Torah and mitzvahs, which is Avas HaTorah. So the short of it is that as we celebrate and we live with Yud and Yud Aleph Shvat, every individual, every one of us, men and women and children, needs to find a way to bepoil mamish concretely in every one of these three aspects, strengthen our commitment, our involvement, our iskashros in our Chabad, in our Shiurei Torah, to strengthen the ones that we have, to initiate new ones, to learn and delve more deeply in our Kiyam HaMitzvahs Bepoil, to be more careful and to spread and share the Kiyam HaMitzvahs with others, and as importantly in our Avas Yisrael, Avas Hashem and Avas HaTorah. Now with that said, I'd like to get to the main event, and I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, who traveled far to be here with us tonight, Rabbi Chazan, a renowned Maggid Shir. Hundreds of people flock to hear his shiurim. A Rav in one of the oldest shul in the what's the name of the United Kingdom? Of one of the oldest shuls in Manchester, that we have the honor and the pleasure of having with us tonight, Rabbi Chazan.
L'chaim, l'chaim. There's a classic story that's told of a young, dynamic, brilliant entrepreneur who inherited a rather run-down mom-and-pop restaurant from his parents in a derelict, deprived inner-city slum. But with drive and determination, he built it into a thriving, flourishing business. And eventually he decided to move to an upscale, brand new location in an affluent area. And to celebrate the grand opening, his chaverim, his cart, until he opened the little cartel, the card next to it, which said, "May his dear soul rest in peace." So he realized Nebuch the florist had made a terrible error. He knew it was a mistake, but he decided to call him up and give him a piece of his mind. And he says, "Young man, cool it, slow down. You think you got problems. At this very moment, not far from where you're standing, a funeral is taking place. And in the funeral chapel, there's another brilliant bouquet of flowers. And underneath the card reads, 'Congratulations on your new location.'" And I tell this story, Rabbi Yisai, because the purpose of Achsidische Farbrengen is to make sure that we don't rest in peace, but at the end of this evening, we should find ourselves in an exalted, a much more spiritual place than we started off with. You know, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Bali Lula, wrote in a Sicha, "Sie gewiss, it's certain that B'Mehi Lula, the Rebbeim are ma'oire rachm rabim, they evoke divine compassion and mercy on behalf of their followers." But that's in a general, makiftika sense. Aber if Chassidim are keveya, Chassidische Farbrengen B'Mehi Lula, mit der Leintap pan to the Bali Lula. It's as if you're standing in the presence of the Rebbe and handing him over a pidyon nefesh. And parenthetically, may I add, Yud Shvat Tovshin Yud Aleph, the day the Rebbe, the Siderenu, was Makabel the Nesius, he was incredibly busy. They sent a bocher to go to the Rebbe's apartment on Brooklyn Avenue to make some phone calls on behalf of the Rebbe and to put the Rebbe in touch with certain people he needed to speak to. By the name of Moshe Groner, and he went into the Rebbe's apartment and he connected the Rebbe with these people, elders, and he went into the Rebbe's dining room. And he saw in the dining room there were 11 chairs, and before each chair there was a sefer, one from the Baal Shem Tov. Next there was a chair with a sefer from the Maggid of Mezrich, the Alter Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe Marash, the Rebbe Rashab, the previous Rebbe, and what we know today to be the Rebbe's Reshivas. In other words, when the Rebbe was being makabel in Nesius, he became part of an unbroken chain. So when we have a Fabrengen, there's actually an amazing Gemara in Bab Metzia Daf Pevo. The Gemara tells the story, a famous Gemara we all know, Kamiflagei ben Mesifta de Rekia. There was a cosmic debate between the Almighty, between Kutchabrichu and Mesifta de Rekia, in a very obscure, obtuse, arcane area of Saras. And the Gemara says, Manoichach, who is going to be the arbiter, who is going to decide? Rabba Bar Nachmeni. He's the expert in this particular area. He paskin, like Kutchabrichu, Tor, and with the words Tor, his soul ascended on high. At the time, he happened to have been a fugitive from the government. He was on the run. He was in the middle of nowhere, And suddenly a nofal piska, a note fell down from the heavens, from the cosmos, Rabba Bar Nachmeni Nizbakesh B'Yeshiva Shel Yeshiva Shel Mayl. He's been recalled to the heavenly academy. The Gemara says, Yotzo Abaye V'chul Rabba. He had suddenly passed on. He had collapsed. No one knew where he was. And they went to search. And they suddenly saw Tzipora de Metallalin, birds circling over and over in the same location. That's where Rabba is. And the Sforim say, who are these Tziporim? Where will I find Rabba, the Rebbe, the leader, the Rabba de Umnei, the leader of our generation? The Gemara says by Moshe Rabbeinu, when the Romans sent a legion to uncover, to pinpoint where was he buried, on Har Nevoi. So when they were on the bottom of the mountain, it appeared to them that Moshe's burial is on top. When they went to the top of the mountain, it appeared to him he's in the so people on a very lowly spiritual level, it appeared that Moshe Rabbeinu was sent to heaven. People with a rather more deeper, more perceptive Weltanschauung approach to life, they know that Moshe Rabbeinu is here. Where is Rabba? Where could you find the Rebbe? Whenever you see Tzipora de Metalpo, there are Talmidim who are chazering over his words. There you know the Rebbe is. His neshama is here with us. And when the Rebbe is here, the Shalshel is going back all the way to the Baal Shem Tov, to Achaz Shiloni, to Har Sinai continues, and there the Rebbe is. So sitting by Achsidische Fabrengen, there's a famous story with the Rebbe Nishmose Eid and his brother, the older brother, the Razor. When they were little children growing up in Lubavitch, I was a kid in New York, I played Cowboys and Indians. In the Rebbe's Hoif in Lubavitch, they played Rebbe and Chosset. And eventually the Rebbe Rashab told his brother, we're ditching, we're giving up this game. What a Rebbe is, no one has a clue. Aber a Chosset, to be a Chosset is nicht kein Spiel. It's not a game. Rabbi Yoel always tells the story that when he was a young Bachrel, and he was trying for the first time to write a pan before the New Year, and he missed the Mashpia was giving a lesson. How does one write a pan? How do you write a pidyon nefesh, a petition to the Rebbe? So the Mashpia sent him to Reb Zalman Moshe, one of the celebrated Chassidim, famous Reb Zalman Moshe. He walked in, he was wearing talis and tefillin. He told him to come back in a half hour. Comes back. What do you want? Teach me how to write a pan. No problem. Bring me a pen, bring me a paper. As Zalman Moshe started writing the pay of the word pan, he burst out in sobbing, weeping uncontrollably. He says, come back in an hour until he regains his composure. Came back in an hour, the same scene unfolds. And Yoel never went back to Zalman Moshe to learn how to write a pan. But he realized writing a pan, standing in front in the presence of the Rebbe, at a special moment, the Yom Hilula, is something vogedik. It's something demanding. You know, the Rebbe Rashab, when he was in Rostov, before he passed on, he was eating a meal, and it was a Polish chassid, a refugee. And this Polish chassid, as the minig, the custom is in Poland, when the Rebbe took a bite of the food, he started grabbing the food. The Rebbe looks at him like, why did you steal my meal? So he said, Rebbe, steht in Sforim HaKadoshim, as the Shrayim for a tzaddik is mezakeh. The leftovers from a tzaddik, it elevates. So the Rebbe Rashad said, my Shrayim is mechayif. If you eat from the Rebbe's table, you eat the Rebbe's Shrayim, which is something that all of us have. The fact that we're sitting here by a Fabrengen, and some wind blew us into Lubavitch, it's mechayif. Uvo alecha kol habrachas ha'ela v'yisiguchas, and Sfarim HaKadosh say bilosh na'asagas harayvad. If we all receive brachas from the Rebbe for ourselves, for our children, begashmis and beruchnis, it demands some reciprocity from all of us. So tonight by a Fabrengen, there's Simchas Torah Tavshin Vov, Kimdumani. The Chassidim had undergone the Holocaust. They were refugees. The bulk of Chassidim Chabad who survived the war found themselves in Asiatic Russia. And the largest Rikuz of Anash, gathering of Anash, was in Samarkand. And everyone knows there are whole books today about it, the starvation, the deprivation, the suffering of those years. Aber the Chassidim, it's Sukkot, Man Simchas Seinu, Simchas Torah. With great difficulty, they fabrein, they were in an elevated mood, they danced, hakofis. By the end of these hakofis, these Sabrachana Jews were tired, they were emaciated, they were famished. And there was one chassid who said, you know what? We've already danced the required 7 hakofis. Let's dance one more dance. We'll link hands. We'll create a choo-choo train, which will cross the Atlantic, and we'll connect ourselves, we'll go to the Rebbe. And certain Chassidim thought they're out of their cotton-picking mind. This guy has had too much to drink. And another group of Chassidim took up the offer. And Ramotl called Kazliner, a celebrated chassid who lived out the last years of his life in Nachlas HaChabad, miracle of miracles, was able to go to the famous Brecha from Lemberg, was able to leave Russia that year. And every chassid who was lazy, who couldn't be bothered, Nebuch stayed in Russia for another 10, 20, 30 years. A Fabrengen is an Eis Rotzen. We live in difficult times. I'm going to tell you, if you ever come to Manchester, England, you're all invited to my house. And I have a very interesting picture that no other Lubavitcher in the world has. No one understands the picture when they look at it. I have it over my living room as you exit. And I just retire the picture. There are clouds, heavy Verwolkene clouds, which are laden, just dark black clouds. This picture was taken, no one has this picture, no one in the world. This picture was taken from the entrance of the oil, Gimel Tammuz, Tovshin Nun Dalet, Be'esti Masagoil. And there was not a Lubavitcher person who used to learn with my father, Olav Shalom. And when he heard, he ran to the cemetery, and he's standing there by the oil. And he was a professional photographer. And everybody was looking in one direction. And this guy, for certain reasons, was looking in the opposite direction. And he was looking up to the clouds, to the heavens. And it's dark, it's black. It was raining, it was dark, it's shocking, a shocking picture. And suddenly there's a hole in the clouds, and you see the light, the rays of the sun shining through the clouds. And sometimes when I'm in a down mood, I just sit there and I look at this picture. And I think this is our matziv today. It's like a dark. Times when you have to join that choo-choo train to Makasher, to where we come from, and to have that yearning, that craving, that desire of Ritzaynenu Liris Malkeinu, of being one with the Rebbe. There was a Yid, Nanel Lubavitcher. Happened to have met him and known him. His name was the Tolner Rebbe he lived in Montreal. He was actually started Teim Chitimim in Montreal. Fine Jew, very sweet, edel Yid. And eventually he moved to Eretz Yisrael, and he set up court in Bayit Vagan. Very bitteldik, simple, God-fearing Jew. He became very close with the Beis Yisrael, the Gerer Rebbe. And he used to walk. He was a Tifa Zokin, an elderly Jew. He used to walk in all kinds of inclement weather, from Bayit Vagan to Gula, to Gerer Besmet. Just a long walk, even for a young person, especially when you're braving the elements. And every week he would walk, and every week he would meet Jews on the way and begin to discuss things. And you're such strenuous effort, and at the end of the day you don't get to the Shalosh Shudas, Raven the Chorayvin. Why don't you daven Meirav Bizmano? Take a monit, take a taxi, at least you'll chop half of the Shalosh Shudas. The Talmud Rebbe said a very famous pshat, which I love. The pasuk says that Moshe Rabbeinu took the oil, v'notolei michutz lamach. He pitched a tent outside of the camp. V'hoyo kol mevakesh Hashem. Anyone who's searching for God, for likus, he will go to that oil. Says Rashi, it's a classical Rashi. It says someone was going to the oil of Moshe, the oil Moshe. But the pasuk says, "V'hoya kol mevakesh Hashem." You're seeking the Eibishter. Mikan, from here we could deduce, says Rashi, "Shamevakesh pnei zokin ki mekabel pnei Hashem." The searching for the pnei zokin for Moshe Rabbeinu is ki mekabel pnei Hashem. Either kol mevakesh for the Rebbe. Then it's as if you're searching for the Eibishter, or you could have said kol mekabel pnei zokin ki mekabel pnei Hashem. But Rashi doesn't say that. Rashi says, Kol ha-mevakesh pnei zokin, if you're searching, if you're yearning, if you're craving to be with the Rebbe, that is already mekabel pnei Hashem. By a fabrengen, there's a bikush, there's a yearning of to be with the Rebbe. I was fabrengen in the afternoon with a group of people. I told them a story. I just mamish came direct from the oil today to Muncie. And I told them a personal feeling. The meaning is, when you go to the oil, before you enter, you knock on the door. Time I knock on the story is told of a woman who unfortunately for many years children. And every Friday afternoon, lighting Shabbos candles was a ganze Niagara Falls, it was a gegossen Treren. And eventually, after many, many years and oceans of tears, she conceived. Suddenly she went to the doctor. Sorry to have to inform you, but complications. Carry this baby to full term, your life will be in jeopardy. And she decided she's going to go full term. And Mirshamayim Yerachnu, the Eibishter will help her. She went into labor. The baby was born a healthy boy. And tragically, the woman passed away in the pregnancy, in the childbirth. Tasks. Who once said, children need someone to ignore. Raising a child eina alein without university, and eventually Vahia Yoim, the day that the father always dreaded, the son comes home after the semester and says, Daddy, I have news you're not going to like, but he's fallen in love with a non-Jewish girlfriend, and love conquers all, he's planning on marrying. And the father tried every weapon in his arsenal, every argument, to no avail. Let's go for a ride. Into the car. And they were just talking about Dvarim Shel Ma'abekach. And suddenly they're driving, seemingly aimlessly, and they come to the entrance of a cemetery. And for the first time, the father tells the son the circumstances of how he was conceived and how he was born. The years of tears, the years of waiting, and how the choice that his mother had. He said, now I want to go. I want you to go to your mother's grave. And I want you to have to tell her, Mama, your Mesiras Nefesh was worth it. And every time you go to the Rebbe's oil, and you stand there, and you see a place where here is the place where the Rebbe stood in the heat, in the snow. And the Rebbe was or whatever. It demands when you enter such a place, it demands a shtickle for us to. You know, there's a pasuk which says Eile Pekud Mashkenu b'shvil Avinasei and V'seim Shal Yisrael. The two Batei Migdash. So a great Yid that told us Adam asked a simple kasha. If the destruction this applies to the Beis HaMikdash. It applies that when the Rebbeim are not here to be seen. The chiyuv halacha is you have to give him back by sundown. And here for almost 2,000, you heard in the clip, the Sikh of the Rebbe, right? 2,000 years, no Beis HaMikdash. Someone years, no Fabringans, no dollars, no davening, garnished. It's a boya shemesh tishivenu. So the pasuk the told us Adam himself answers this problem. He simlasei le'oirei bameh yishka sleep, slumber, b'shachva v'orvish nosech. That he doesn't see the Rebbe, that a Shabbos goes by. To demand, if we do cry out, then the Eibishter has to give it back now. One of my signature stories I always mention. There was a great tzaddik called the Trisker Maggid. He was the son of Rav Moshe Chernobyl, a great holy man. And he hardly ever ate. He rarely ate. He lived like a malach. Why he lives a strange lifestyle? He met up with Baruch Meshbisher. Baruch Meshbisher, God for me, the Eibishter to forgive me for whatever, but not the kind of guy you want to mess with because he'll turn you into a frog. And he'll like, say something, you're finished. Like kaped and you're dead. Therefore, he too hungry to sleep. So he said, so he grabbed him by the lapels of his bekisha, whatever. Either you spill the beans, either you tell me the truth, I'll rip you out of this world, I'll rip you out of the world to come. You hear such frightening words from a renowned tzaddik, he decided to spill the beans. He said his father, the holy Rav of Chernobyl, had a minig, which is a custom till today amongst many Erlich Yidden, that before you daven shachris, before you address the Almighty, before you address your Maker, you don't engage in trivial conversation. He never spoke to any human being before daven. Suddenly, one day, totally out of character, my father, Rav Chernobyl, says to me, Avremele, we're going for a ride. A ride before davening, it's strange. My father is the Rebbe of tens of thousands of Chassidim. He himself hitches up the carriage with the horses, and he himself leads the horses out till the end. We come to this, and the horses they're going 20 million miles a minute. Within no time, until we come to Upside. And there's a high school, a ramshackle little house. Mamish, he's a holy person. He's not talking. I overhear the conversation, and the older man said, my father said with tears trickling down his cheeks, embraced. My father went back in the carriage, and we I had to tell him the truth. The time hasn't come. It's not great. We're not yet ready. And after retelling the story, the Triska Maggid turned to Rav Meshbrizher and said, if you had the schus to see the face of Mashiach Tzidkenu, and you had to hear your father tell him, the Zeit is noch nicht great. The time hasn't come because we're not ready. Would you be able to eat? Would you be able to sleep? And if we live in a generation where the Rebbe tells us fakert, higiyazman gulas, and for over 20 years we're sitting here in darkness. Could we sleep? Could we afford? Elamite, I'm not here for fakert. The Rebbe. My other groups they prava yortzeit. Bachsidim you prava hilul. That's the avoid of the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe always said Yud Shvat was b'kav of simcha. But a person on Yud Shvat makes a cheshbon tzedek of what I owe the Rebbe, what I got from the Rebbe, of the Rebbe's Mesiras Nefesh for us. I was telling a story before. There was Avim Bechut. This was in Antwerp, Belgium. I called him up a few years ago before Rosh Hashanah, as one does, to greet him. And since we're all in the same business, we share stories. I told him my best stories of the year. He told me his stories. He told me a story that happened in Antwerp about 50 years ago, more. The city of Antwerp was rocked by a traumatic passing. It was a young lady in the prime of her life. It's another sad story. And she passed away from this world. People are dying. 12 orphans. But the one who took it the worst was the youngest child, and at the age of 12. His name was Faivish. He took it the worst because he was praying, he was crying his eyes out that his mother should be spared to witness his bar mitzvah. And it wasn't to be. Eventually, the fellow, this Faivish, grew up. He went to yeshiva, got married, started his own family, worked in the burza, successful in the diamond line. He's a Belzer Chassid, right? Lived his life. One day he was on business. The first time in his life he came to Manhattan to do business on 47th Street in Diamond District. When he's in New York for the first time, he's a very interested. He's a communal activist. He's an Askin. He decided to get involved to see different Rabbonim, Rebbes, Rosh Yeshivas, different famous personalities in New York. In 70, it was a hotel. David Meyer, the Rebbe came in. David Meyer walked out. There was nothing to write home about, nothing special. Afterwards, he's about to go take a taxi home, and he sees that something's happening here. A lot of action. Makare, what's happening? So the Rebbes are taking in Yechidus. This guy is parachuted in from Antwerp. Okay. Joins the queue. He's Antwerpians know how to elbow and how to sweet talk. Within no time, he's like top of the queue. And the big oak door of the Rebbe's room opens, and he goes in. The Gaboyim, the Mashpach, where did this guy come from? He's not on the list. People spend months and months and months waiting for Yechidus. Right? There's no appointment, no arrangement. When he hears the Rebbe tells us 5 sits, the Rebbe said, sit, there's nothing you can do. He sits. And a normal chassid comes into the Rebbe. He wrote a pan, right? He has a kvittel. He wrote his petition. What does he want? What's his question? What does he need a bracha for? What? And he ends off with his name and his mother's name. This guy just parachuted in from Mars. He's sitting there. The Rebbe's looking at him. He's looking at the Rebbe. He has never been here before. The Rebbe has never seen him either. I'm like, no, nothing's happening here. The Rebbe then stands up, Malay Mos. He turns around. You may notice in the Rebbe's room, it's a wood paneled whatever. And the Rebbe takes out a whole packet of letters which are bound by a rubber band. And very deftly, suddenly from the middle of this packet, the Rebbe just picks out one particular letter, puts the others back, and starts to read it. And it's a letter from a lady in Antwerp who writes the Rebbe that she's been diagnosed with a terrible, debilitating disease. It's metastasized, spread all over her body. Medical science offers her no hope. But if this is she has no problem, she's at peace with her maker. She only asked the Rebbe to storm the heavens to evoke Rachel Shemayim on behalf of her husband and her 12 children. The Rebbe should intercede. And she ends off signing her name and her mother's name, as is customary. Suddenly this Favish is sitting there, and he's completely, utterly, totally blown away. So often a Ruach HaKodesh. This is incredible, amazing, clairvoyant, prophetic powers. He's come in with, like, unannounced, parachuted in, and of a billion letters, the Rebbe just picks out a letter from the middle, and that's his mother's letter. And first thing, the expression was, Oisus amoisus and badas mechom. You know, big deal, what Rebbes do for a living. They're Ruach HaKodesh, big deal. Then suddenly the penny drops, and he realized, what is this letter showing? It's illustrating the incredible love of a mother to her children. Imagine a person, Rachmana litzlan azah matzah. She's not asking the Rebbe for a moifis, for a refuah. Forget about me. She totally self-effacing, putting herself dedicated. Loses, and the Rebbe patiently waits for him to regain his composure. And then this Favish turns to the Rebbe and he says, Rebbe, can I have that letter? This is a concrete, tangible expression of his mother's love. And the Rebbe apologized, and says, I'm sorry, but I can't give it to you, because when I go down, before I go down to give a bracha to the Tzminim, down to Kol Nidrei, every year I read this letter. And what the Maisa, what I learned from this is, right, that if you want, you could be Nehilin le'shvila d'rakia. It's Yom HaKodesh. You're going down in a kittul doim and kamalachim, and you're a gamalach a whole year. But when you want to evoke Rachem Shemayim, how does one do so? Dafka through Mesiras Nefesh. And a choser has to realize the famous story told of the Mittler Rebbe's daughter, Dverleya, who married the Chekasser, who was the son of her Moshe Chernobyl. And one day she went into her shver, to her father-in-law, and she wanted to go back home to Lubavitch to visit her father, her mother, her family. And the Moshe Chernobyl told his daughter-in-law, Dverleya, go to your father, the Mittler Rebbe, and tell him that one of my Chassidim, of Chernobyl Chassidim, he became a Kuruf to Chabad, and tell him to send back my chosset. Und ob nicht, if not, kannst du bleiben euch in Lubavitch. Don't bother coming home unless your father sends you back to this chosset. It's a very, very uncomfortable message for a daughter-in-law to give to her father. At the end of her stay, she has to go back home to her family, but she had no brayer, but she had to pass over her father-in-law. Go back to Chernobyl to your shver, and tell them that by mir ein chossid is mer tire wie sieben tech. One chossid is more precious than 7 daughters. And I thought to myself, there's like a middler music. Where do you see in Shas somewhere Azar Maisa? Remember Rabbi Yochanan? Hello? What do you know about Rabbi Yochanan? When he went, the Gemara says, when he went to a Shiva house in Nebuchadnezzar, Menachem Oval, he would take out a bone, a tooth, and he'd tell him, Dein garmo da asiro abir. Rabbi Yochanan had a very, very difficult life, in many ways. He took out this little fragment of a bone, and said, this is the bone of my 10th child who I buried. And you know what? He was Makabel Yisurim Ba'avo, he accepted it, Tatzur Tom Paul, etc. When his chassid, when his Talmud, Rish Lakish, passed away, what does the Gemara say? Shaf midaitoi, he cracked. Couldn't handle it, and the Rabbanan asked for mercy, and he was taken from this world. His Zechariah by Rabbi Yochanan, his Chassid, his Talmud, Rish Lakish, his Makabel, was more precious to him than everything in the world. A Chassid has to know, the Rebbe said, Yud Shvat is the day of Simcha. Simcha is Begimatria or Olam. Simcha is Gimatria Zare B'chayim. Right? And as Chassidim always said, Mahu B'chayim Af Zare B'chayim. The Rebbe lives amongst us. We have to realize that as much as we open our hearts to allow the Rebbe in our lives, in our hearts, to that extent, the Rebbe is able to be poil. And let me just leave you with one thought at the moment. I mentioned this afternoon, there was if you ever go to Crown Heights, I'm sure people do, there's a fruit store on the corner of Kingston and Kingston Avenue and President Street, which has been there, I think, since Christopher Columbus discovered the country. And many, many years ago, this store, Raskin's Fruit Store, they were asked to make a delivery to Rebbe's house on President Street. So one of the boys took the fruit box, went there, and he rang the bell, and usually a Heusbacher or some attendant, some assistant would take the package. This time he rang the bell, and the Rebbe Sin B'chvoid Atzma opened the door, took the package of fruits, vegetables. She always insisted on paying right away, and incidentally, the Rebbesins were always great tippers. Even though they usually say what difference in a Jew in a canoe, one tips, one doesn't, right? But the Rebbe is always mahader in tipping azoi kiyan. And they took the bill, and whatever the bill was, and the Rebbetzin asks, she pulls out $100 bill, and she says, "You have change?" Perhaps the Rebbetzin has change. So the Rebbetzin said in some moiridige sharp words. The Rebbetzin answered the Raskin boy, "In Zarske Mishpocha halt mir nicht kein Klingelt." In the royal family, in aristocracy, one doesn't carry small change. That means when you deal with the Rebbe, right? The Pasuk says, the Rebbe wants greatness. The Rebbe was never civil, narrow, parochial, pea-brained people. There's a long story. The newspaper writer, Gershon Baruch Jacobs, said, I'm not going into the whole story, it's a brilliant story. He once went on a shlichus to Russia, and he eventually went into Yechidus from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., reporting to the Rebbe what happened. And in the course of a long Yechidus, a fascinating Yechidus, some other time maybe show you all the details. You have Yossi Jacobs in here, I'm going to tell you. He said, the Rebbe asked, give me an interview, you're a journalist. There's no censorship in America. He felt very, very uncomfortable. He asked one question to the Rebbe. It was very sharp. He asked the Rebbe, what is the Rebbe's greatest regret? What is the Rebbe's greatest regret? Regret. And the Rebbe said a mashal of a fellow who was meducha b'yisurim and yisuri iv. Everything went upside down, inside out. Nothing was working right. He lost his wife, his children were ill, he had no parnasa. Everything was upside down. And physically, bodily, he suffered with a terrible leprosy, a type of skin disease. And the whole time he was sitting kratzing and he was tearing his flesh, besides himself. Punk, the king, was a chaver, was a friend of this fellow. He heard about his predicament. King passed by, and he said, the king asked this fellow, Yankel, I see you're suffering terribly. You know, whatever you want, your wish is my command. I'll grant any request. What would you like? What would you want? So he said, Your Majesty, I'm suffering so much, so badly with the skin disease, which is so itchy, and I'm itchy all over. But there's parts of my back with my hands, I'm not an octopus, with the parts of my hands, I can't get to my back. If the king could give me some new hamso, some kind of the kratz, to help me scratch my back and get rid of the itching there, I would be great. I'd be internally grateful. And the moral of the story is sometimes the Rebbe is offering you the heavens, and you want kleinigkeit, and you're interested in kleingeld. I was, every year in 770, Mitzvah Yom Kippur, I was a bacher, the old chassid called Shlomo Aaron Kazarnovsky. He used to fabring every year, Mitzvah Yom Kippur. He always told the same story, I remember, for years, when he first came from Russia to New York. And he was collecting money for the yeshiva, And one of his major sponsors were the Kramer brothers, very famous Chabad-connected lawyers. And their office was like the top of the Woolworth building, one of the first skyscraper in history. And one day he's looking down from the 60th floor, the top of the Woolworth building. He's looking down. And suddenly he's saying, wait, everyone looks like little pig, ants. And he thought to himself, the Baal Shem Tov taught that everything a Yid sees, a Yid hears, a Roan Avodas Hashem, something we could learn from it. What could I learn? He says, if you're eyeball to eyeball with a person down here on the same level, right? Then everything makes such a big difference. You're wearing a Zat tie and some schmerel from Italy scribbled his name on your tie, he's paid another $20, right? When you pick yourself up from a different man, you look down, the 60th floor, top of the Woolworth building, top of the Empire State Building, top of the World Trade Center, suddenly all of these things that bother you so much in life suddenly pale into utter insignificance. The Idach in Lubavitch, in the Alter Rebbe's times, in the Ozhne, there's a famous chassid called Lozhe the Krummer. Eliezer the crooked one. And once Chassidim were Fabrengen, they asked him, Lozhe, where did you get such a funny nickname? Why are you called Der Krummer? So he said, I'll tell you very simple. A normal person on a normal day could see maybe 20 miles, and then you see the horizon turns inward. It becomes crooked. The law of physics. But if you're standing on the top of a lofty summit of a mountain, and you look, you could see perhaps on a clear day 100 miles before the horizon begins to bend. Kumt ois where by Yenim is crooked, by mir is nachalech. Therefore it's called the Krummer. The Rebbe picked us up on top of the mountain. The Rebbe gave us siddur to look at things from a totally different perspective, a different vantage point. And what a yom, the pagra, a yemilula of Yud Shvat demands is all of us. When I was growing up, when I was in yeshiva, we were told, it was like a rule, that always write to the Rebbe, and always start off every letter, Hineni bozel levaser toif. Try to be able, I remember when I came from a Litvish background. When I came from Tervadas to Kfar Chabad, the first year, there was a bar mitzvah for Yesonim. And the guest speaker that year was a professor called Velvel Green. You probably all know him. He tried to speak in Ivrit, which was not that way inclined. And I remember his difficult speech, but one line always remained, which was engraved in my soul. I'll never ever forget. He described how he became frum and he became Al-Truva. And suddenly he was in Yechidus, and the Rebbe was talking to him in Yiddish, interestingly enough. And there's this one line that the Rebbe told Velvel Green in Yechidus has always been indelibly etched in my soul. The end of the Yechidus, after going through all of his issues and problems, the Rebbe told Velvel Green, Gedenkt, sitzt da Yid in Brooklyn, was tracht wegen dir und deiget wegen dir. Remember, there sits a Jew in Brooklyn who thinks about you, who cares about you. Seitz mishtadel tonem nachas ruch. Endeavor, try to give him a bit of nachas. L'chaim, l'chaim. Forget for Shabtai. Yeah. Did it da, yeah, you did it da, ma, yeah, you did it da.
La 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 la, yeah, yeah, la la la.
But this is what he explained it. Binyamin Kletzker took him as the Eidim. Binyamin Kletzker took him as the Eidim. He's in chain. He said it's a shot. give you to Bas Yisrael. But how else can I have you a baby? What? Yeah. Gerade, you just kissed him, I sat next to your brother in Los Angeles. You just kissed him, I sat next to your brother in Los Angeles. What? No, I'm just telling you. He also gave me yours. No, I have to tell him.
I'm going to borrow the mic, is that all right?
Gesundheit.
Just to give it to
Doing great.
I don't know if I can. I apologize. Actually, one
ya la 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 ya la la ma ya la la ya la la ram. Ay la 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 ya la la ya la la ya la 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 ya la la. You can make the tone now. La la ram. Ay la 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 ya la la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 Oh yeah yeah da 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 my la ya da da ya da da ya da da ya ya da 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 ya la la da my la my la my ya da 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 ay da ya da ya da ya ya da 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 ya ya la la da da ya da da my la la my la la ma la 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 ya da da ya na da ya ru ya da 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 ya da da ay la la ya la 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 ya da da ya la da ya ya da 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 ya la 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 ya da ma ya da ya da da ram ay la 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 da da ya ya da da ram ay dam ay da 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 ma da da.
If everyone could please find your way back to your seats. Before we continue, if everyone could please find your way back to your seats. Just want to tell over a quick story of the Baal Shem Tov that's relevant to our efforts here to have a Farbrengen. One time the Baal Shem Tov was davening, probably a famous story that everyone knows, but worth repeating. The Baal Shem Tov was davening, and his davening went on for a very long time. And initially his Talmidim, they were waited, they hung in there. After a while, it seemed that Baal Shem Tov would be quite a while at his davening, so they slipped away one by one to go do what they needed to do, figuring when they come back, the Baal Shem Tov would still be davening. And then when he finishes, they would all be there. When they came back, they found the Baal Shem Tov long having finished davening and looking very disappointed. So Baal Shem Tov said, let me tell you what happened. I'll give you a mashal. There were people walking down the road, and at the top of a very tall tree, they saw an exotic bird, one that one doesn't come across hardly ever. And they decided, let's get the bird. It's an amazing find. So they started to build a pyramid. More people on the bottom, a fewer people on the top, until they would reach the pinnacle, the top of the tree, and they'd grab the bird. As they're building this pyramid, someone on the second row remembered that he had an errand to run. And so off he went. one can already imagine what happened to their pyramid. So the Baal Shem Tov said, when I daven and I reach, my neshama soars, of course paraphrasing, my neshama soars to the highest of heights. He told his Talmidim, you are my pyramid. I need you here to be able to reach the heights that I can reach. And if you leave me, the whole thing is over. Point is, a Farbrengen is a participatory event. We're not here to be entertained by a gifted speaker. We're here to live the day, this monumental day. It requires each one of us our active participation, which I wanted to encourage, and also to mention again that Emirchim, after this is done, the Farbrengen will continue over at the Tzemach Tzedek. Just to say one last thing that I was asked to mention, which is that this evening, which is done in the spirit of Hakel, just like, for example, on Motzei Shabbos, we have Havdalah, Malava Malka. We say Havdalah not to separate and divide between Shabbos and the weekday, rather to give definition and then to build a bridge, a connection from Shabbos into the week that follows. Similarly, Shemitah, which is Shabbos, on Motzei Shemitah, we have Hakel. We reenact Matan Torah so that we can carry the spirit of Shabbos, the spirit of Shemitah, into the cycle to follow. And so in this spirit, we've had a number of events that, although geographically in Muncie we're spread far and wide, Baruch Hashem, each shul thriving in its own community, but we are one larger community, and this is, as long as I've been here, there's this mevukash to find ways to, from time to time, bring the entire community together to remember that we're one larger community, and anyone with ideas or so on can approach Rabbi Markowitz, Yena Abenson, or such. And in the spirit of continuing this Hakel spirit between our larger community. And with that, I invite Rabbi Chazan to continue.
Sure. Chaim. After Gimel Tammuz, there was a line, which actually Mocker is from Karlin, well-known line, Anaran Ashoite is der was sagt, as the Rebbe felt. When Anaran Ashoite is der was sagt, as the Rebbe felt. Only a fool says we're not missing the presence of the Rebbe. Only a fool says that the Rebbe's presence is not here with us. I want to explain this based on two stories, which are both of whom I think are incredible mices. Awesome. When I heard it the first time, it shocked me. There was a fellow in Tzahal in the Israeli army who was in the Human Resources Department. And Nebuch was in charge. His portfolio, he was in charge of Nebuch soldiers who laid down their lives in the course of duty over the year. And he had to deal with the orphans, the widows, to pick up the broken pieces of the lives of... And he became close to Chabad. And he was in Yechidus by the Rebbe. And in the course of a conversation, the Rebbe asked him how many soldiers, Nebuch, how many soldiers had passed away the previous year. And he told him, it's 32. And the Rebbe thought deeply, and he said, no, it's 34. You know the story? Yeah? So the fellow was like shocked. How in the world, that's his job, 24/7, that's what he's involved in. How could the Rebbe sitting in Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn tell that it's this guy who's in, how? And he went back to Israel, and he started checking through the records, and he realized, how could there were 32 in the regular army? There were 2 others in the Secret Service, whatever, also had perished that year. And he realized the Rebbe was right, and he was shocked. And he decided next time he goes into the Rebbe, he's going to ask the question, how in the world could the Rebbe possibly know? Which is precisely what he did. He's an Israeli, no holds barred. He asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, all the neshamas that go up and all the neshamas that came down, it comes from here. Do you hear this word? It's like awesome. It's like mind-boggling. And there's a similar story told when the Rebbe had the heart attack Shmini Atzeret, Lamed Ches, needed a doctor. There happened to have been in 770 at the time a young man who was a top cardiologist from Toronto, Canada. He was in the crowd, he was exploring Judaism, and he immediately offered his services. But he insisted that the Rebbe goes to hospital. And the Rebbe was adamant that he wants to remain in 770. Finally, the fellow was so frustrated, he said, Rebbe, like he wanted they should sign a disclaimer that he takes no responsibility for the care if the Rebbe refuses to follow the physician's instruction. And he saw he was getting nowhere with the Rebbe. And then the Rebbe, I remember seeing, I was right outside, the Rebbetzin walked in. And he figured if he can't convince the Rebbe, maybe he'll convince the Rebbetzin to convince the Rebbe to go to hospital. Which is precisely what he did. And he later said the Rebbetzin the Rebbe was lying down, and they brought out a bed from upstairs, the third floor. The Rebbe was lying in the bed. His eyes were closed. The Rebbetzin was standing there. Her hand was on the bookcase. And he said, Rebbetzin, could she intervene to get the Rebbe to go to hospital? And the Rebbetzin said, in all of her married years, she's never, ever tried to get the Rebbe to do what the Rebbe doesn't want, like against his Ratzon. Number one. And number two, if the Rebbe wants to be here, Mistamba, this is the best place. So his doctor saw, the cardiologist, he's not getting anywhere with the Rebbe, so he'll go back to the Rebbe. So he went back to the Rebbe's bed, he picked up the Rebbe's hand, and he gave back a script, Rebbe, sepikuach nefesh, it's a matter of life and death. And the Rebbe opened up his holy eyes, and the Rebbe said, Du zest dem Tisch, do you see this table? Durch dem Tisch is gekommen Yeshuas and Refuas for 1000 Jahre. Is bei mir der Tisch is Kodesh Gadosh. Und mein Yeshua wird euch kommen durch den Tisch. Thousands of Jews receive their blessing through this table, through this place. And therefore, my personal Holy of Holies, and my Refuah, my Yeshua was going to come through this place. And therefore the Rebbe wanted to be in 7-7. So the moral of the story is that a tzaddik, a Rebbe, a Nasi, he's the tziner, he's the conduit to which everything goes up and everything goes down. Zeh hashar l'Hashem, tzaddik. And therefore you ask yourself, since Gimel Tammuz, Tovshin and Dalet, have children been born? Have neshamas come down? Have neshamas gone up? How is it happening? And I heard a story which really hit me. One of the Chassidim who was closest to Beis Harav, to Rebbe's family, was a Yid by the name of Beryl Unick. Many of you surely knew him. Beryl Unick actually left Russia in the famous, escape in 1946. He escaped on papers as the Rebbetzin Chana's son. And he was very, very close to the Rebbetzin Chana, to the Rebbe. He used to visit Rebbetzin Chana, the Rebbe's mother, every day. And once Beryl Unick came into Rebbetzin Chana, the Rebbe had a thought. Very often when the Rebbe pens a letter, especially in times of simchas, like, for example, a wedding, chasanas, under the chuppah we read the Rebbe's nusach, standard nusach. And the Rebbe says always, Hinni, Bozel, Lahabia, Birchosi, Birchos Mazel, etc. If you think about it, in Lashon HaKodesh, it's a rather laborious, roundabout way of saying, I'm going to bless you. The Rebbe could have just said, Hinni, Bozel, Levorich. Lahabia, Birchosi. Rather strange way of expressing it. So Beryl Unick told the Rebbe Zechana, he thought about it. And then he came to the pasuk, which we say every Shabbos in Tzuki the Zimra. Yoim li yoim yabia oimer. What is yabia oimer? Rashi brings pshat. Then Rashi says, Menachem posar. Menachem said pshat, miloshen mayin hanivei. And if you look al Asar in the Medrash Tilip, the Medrash says that is the way of tzaddikim. There are mayin haniveya she'eni poisik meim of la'olam la'olam. The waters of the tzaddik is something which continues to be issue for all of eternity. I can't claim Pekias in anything, actually. In Tanakh, the only thing that leaked in cup on Menachem Posar is also connected to Chabad. In Kapitel Memches, everyone knows that in Chassidus Chabad, the 48th chapter, the 48th Psalm, is very, very choshev. This was the Kapitel the Rebbe said, Yud Shvat by Kabbalah Sanasius. This was the kapitel Memches, which the Baal Shem Tov said on Chayel Tov Kuv Hey, the year when the Alter Rebbe's neshama was born, and the Baal Shem Tov was kaching. Maybe we'll talk about it later. In the fact that a neshama chadosh is coming down in the world, and the Frierdiker Rebbe brings in Sichos the first Torah the Alter Rebbe was zoicha to hear from the Baal Shem Tov, although it was after he physically left this world, was on Kapitel Memches. And that was the first Torah the Alter Rebbe said after he makabel the Nesiyos of Chassidus Chabad. And how does Kapitel Memches end off? Hizel Likim Elikeinu Olam Voed, which is the Kapitel. There's a Sikha of the Rebbe, a Chayel Sikha, where the Rebbe Kachsuch in the Sheikhs of this Gadol Elikeinu, the Davka, the connection to Chassidus Chabad. I'm not the time to Chazer Olam. There's a deep, profound Sikha. But Hizel Likim Elikeinu Olam Voed, Hu Yinagenu Almus. So there it says Menachem Posar, also for all of eternity. Interessant. 2 Menachem Posars that I remember. So Beryl Yunik told the Rebbe Zechano, La Bia Birchosi means that the Rebbe's bracha is not only for there and then and now. Miloshen Mayan Haniveya La'adul Ilmei Lomim, it's something which is all for all of eternity. The next day he came back to Rebbe Zechano, and she said she told over his pshat, his gedank to the Rebbe was makab. The Rebbe accepted it. The Rebbe enjoyed it. So this, if I had the time, which I don't really, because now it's not the time or place, the whole kapitel is dealing with our matzav. Hashemayim Misapim Kvid Kei, L'Masi Yodav by Magid Rakia, and as the Gemara says in Ksuvas Daf Hey, that refers to Masi Yadayim Shel Tzadikim Magid. That's Tzadikim with 2 hands. I have the whole arichs. There's a time of Yom Yabia Omer. There's a time of Laila V'Laila Chavedoas when Ein Omer Vein Dvorim. You see nothing, you feel you. And nevertheless, our time we say that there's a bracha, there's something there that despite whatever happens in the dark. I always say, why Chassidim when you say l'chaim, you say l'chaim on whiskey, on vodka, on alcohol. No one ever says l'chaim on Coca-Cola, on Fanta, on Dr. Pepper. The Chassidim always say if you have a good single malt whiskey, and you have a chayim between the fish and the soup on a Friday night. Afterward, you put it in your freezer and take it out next to the Shabbos. It's a chayim. You put anything else in your freezer, right? It's going to freeze. The uniqueness of alcohol is that it's impervious to its surroundings. So whatever is happening around it, something which is pneumistic, it remains what it is. There's a story of a couple who became a Kurif, unbelievable story, how suddenly a Shliach of Chabad suddenly comes in the middle of nowhere, and they had cried for some hadracha. This person, through that Shliach, through a Rav, became a Kurif to Chassidus Chabad. And they went from Auschwitz to New York to thank the Rebbe for his care, for his concern. And the person asked the Rebbe, he was a professor, it's a well-known story, and he asked the Rebbe, I'm going back to Eretz Yisrael now. What happens if I have to make a very important, transformative decision in life, and time is of the essence, and I physically cannot contact the Rebbe, I can't get hold of the Rebbe, what do I do for an eitzah, where do I turn? And the Rebbe told him, immediately going forward, you could be makasher through machshava, through thoughts. There's actually a story told of Chanan Morozov, was taken in by the GPU in Rosh Hashanah. And afterwards, when he got out, the Frierdiker Rebbe said, why didn't you tell me? He's like arrested by the communists. He said, that's shrayin, you have to give a geshrei, right? Lebe rateva. And even if you do this mentally, and there's hundreds of such stories that I could tell you, but in Kambekwem I don't be of the Rebbe picking up and the Rebbe answering and the Rebbe being poil, just through machshava. There's actually, and this is the matzav we're in now. I'll tell you a story which really hit me, like shocked me. You've been to Yerushalayim, I'm sure most people, and you've seen the Rebbe Arlich, tells Aaron Chassidim, dressed in a funny garb, yeah? Very religious people, actually. And their Rebbe, that tells Aaron Rebbe, was a very darhui Yid, a very, very special Yid. The Rebbe once said on him, you could get your Shemayim just looking at it. one day he called in his son-in-law, his name is Rabbi Yisrael, and he told him that you're going to New York, a trip, whatever. I want you to hand in a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe secretary, Rabbi Chatakov. He looked shocked because the Rebbe are really, they're like the Glilus of Satmar. They're like very, you wouldn't expect the Tolosar Rebbe, the Rebbe to have a connection to Lubavitch. So his son-in-law was very amazed. He started telling about the Rebbe. And he said shvochim, he said things about the Rebbe that he said about nobody else. He said the day will come that the Haredish world will appreciate who the Lubavitch Rebbe is. We heard such incredible statements from his father-in-law about the Lubavitch Rebbe. He decided when he goes and he delivers his father-in-law's sealed envelope, he needed to have a personal request, and he will write his own private letter, which is exactly what he did. His father-in-law got a reply, and he never got a reply in his letter. But Tevaila, he established a kesher, and over the course of many, many years and decades, he was the go-between between these two courts, the court of the Rebbe Arlach, the Zilz Aroner in Yerushalayim, and 770 in New York. He was back and forth, Behasel Mahacha. The Toldus Aaron Rebbe passed away in Nun Zayin, if my memory serves me correctly. And this fellow, Yisrael, already was living in New York at the time, came for the Levaya. Soon afterwards, he went back for a family simcha, chasana, in Yerushalayim. And suddenly, there's a call from Rabbi Yomin Klein, Olav Shalom, to a Rav in Pardes Katz, which is a suburb of Bnei Brak, a guy by the name of Aaron Shapiro, who's really a Lubavitcher, but he dresses like a Polish. And Rabbi Yomin is trying to locate this Rabbi Yisrael, the Edom of the Tolos Aaron Rebbe. And he says, very, very urgent. He says, what happened? He says, suddenly they were cleaning out a cupboard, and they found stuff behind the cupboard was a letter that the Rebbe responded to this fellow in Tafshin Chavtas, 1969. And now is Tafshin Nun Zayin. About 28 years at that. And suddenly they discovered this misplaced letter. And he's trying to contact this Yisrael at home, who he knows, and he couldn't, it was not available. So Rabbi Yomin said, Mr. is there Yisrael? Could you, and this guy knows everybody, he's a Kachlef, he knows everything, what's going on in every court of every Admur in Eretz Yisrael. Maybe he could find out. So he calls his contacts in the Chosser, in the Hoif of the Rebbe Arlach. Yeah, he's in Eretz Yisrael. But he just had a massive heart attack. And he was raced to the hospital by ambulance. And at the moment, he's fighting for his life. So he calls back, Aaron Shapiro calls back Rabbi Yomin, tells him the matzah, just fax me immediately the letter. And the actual letter, in which Rabbi Yomin said there were $7 that were included, that you can send me by post. That's not a murder, but send me the actual letter. He sends back the actual, the fax, takes the letter, he races to the hospital. Like the family is around him. It's like a really bad situation. And suddenly he reads the letter, this guy, and he's like, and he sits up, and he's chazik. Baruch Hashem, he had a mamash arfua, shleima, complete, total recovery. And afterwards he said, what blew his mind, what was the Hashem? He said he wrote the Rebbe this letter in Tafshin Chavtes. This was the first time he had any shaykhus, that he had a shlichus mehasam loch. It's the first time the father used him as the go-between, the medium. And in this letter in Tafshin Chavtes, 1969, the Rebbe thanks him for all of his shlichusim. And the Guf Ksaviat Kodshay on the Gillion, on the side of the letter, the Rebbe handwritten, the Rebbe gives him a bracha for a four shleima krevim April. He said 1969, he was a fish younger man, he was healthy like a horse. So they told the Rebbe to give me a bracha for four shleima. This letter got lost. It was misplaced in some cupboard, like many other things in 770 over the years, whatever. And suddenly, 28 years later, it's suddenly miraculously discovered, and it was faxed in time. And then he realized why, by the Derech Agav, why he got $7, because by that time, in Zion, he had 7 children. The moral of the story is that the Rebbe is what is the Gemara saying? Ksuvis, Kol man da Omar noch nafshi the Rebbe yidocher b'chert. Anyone who says that the Rebbe is not with us, active, etc. I shouldn't say this in public, but Gudidi Havi Uvda. Personal family story. I have an Enoch who suddenly was raced to the hospital about 2 years ago, critically ill, mamish, fighting for his life. And the doctor said, even if he's able to make it through, he'll never be able to walk again. They were like, mamish, terribly pessimistic. Baruch Hashem, and brachas. It took them, the shluchim accepted upon themselves various Mivtzoyim, various chusim, before Pesach, etc. Miracle of miracles, Baruch Hashem, there were 2 operations, and unbelievable to the utter amazement of the doctors. He came out alive, and he's able to, and eventually was able to walk. And then he had other problems, internal problems. I shouldn't say this in public, but I'm taking it anyway. He had to wear a nappy, etc., etc. And the first time he had a major turnover, by the way, was after he got out of hospital. I told my Adim, take him to the oil. And he took this little baby to the oil. Every time he went to the oil, you saw another radical change for the better. He needs therapists. Like a 2.5-year-old, 3-year-old, just turning 3, just for the upshare. He got therapists for speech, for this, for various physical issues. And there's a lady from Borough Park, who's not a Lubavitcher, who came to do some kind of therapy and walking, I can't remember what. And after he finished, he was able to walk already. Baruch Hashem, he's starting. They bought him as a bicycle. You know, these kids have these little plastic colored bicycles. Like, little, like car. He sits in the car, and I'm pedaling away, and Baruch Hashem is able to use his feet now. He's pedaling away. They open the door of the house, and he's pedaling, and he's going down the corridor of the flat, of the apartment, up and down the corridor, but elevated. So they're watching, and then he comes back into the house, into the apartment, and this lady from Borough Park and my daughter are standing there, they're watching, and he goes into a room, and he goes out of his car, and he's a little kid, and every time he had a yeshua, he came by the oil. So he left the car, he took a siddur, he can't read, he was 2 years old. He took a siddur, Tillim, and he started chuckling. He just opened the Tillim, and he started chuckling away. Where's he chuckling to? There was a radiator in the bedroom. And the radiator in this little child's imagination looked like a mateva. So, my daughter, and this not Lubavitcher lady here, this little 2.5-year-old boy, and his dimion, he's chuckling away, and then he takes the Tillim, gives it a kiss, puts it down, and he says, Rebbe, get rid of my catheter. This lady went crazy. This non-Lubavitcher lady. Absolutely ballistic. And if I tell you the next day, when my daughter changed his diaper, it was incredibly marked Shinui L'Tev. Ich sage nicht, he's not talking about here, Beisel Homler, B'miyachid Yechudim, people davening with Kavonas Haramak and Kavonas Harizah. I'm talking to you, a 2.5-year-old baby who's Kenishkan Ivra. But he knows that if you ask the Rebbe, he's praying to a steam, a radiator, which by M, it represents the Rebbe's oil in his Lord. And then he got an answer. So those of us who the Rebbe schlepped us out, they say that the Alter Rebbe chose those neshamas ad soifel and deirus of Hashem Kabbat. And when the Rebbe Rashab started Teichot Tzmimim, there's a Kabbalah from Shlema Chaim, from Nissen. The Rebbe Rashab was Mizgalgal in the Oilim, and he chose those neshamas that have the schools to learn in Teichot Tzmimim. And it said, B'Shem the Mashpiyim, B'Shem the Frierdiker Rebbe, that when the Rebbe Rashab chose the neshamas that have the schools to learn in Teichot Tzmimim, that it says in Tanya that the machshava dibur u'maisa of a person, the purity, etc., depends on kiddush of the imay. The Rebbe Rashab took our whatever neshamas, and he rinsed it, and he rubbed it, and he made it glistening. Spot was like shining. He made our neshamas shine, and he gave us this opportunity. nervous. What's our job? Have a mechutin. He's a prolific writer, Shalomir Weinberg. He translates a lot. Tell me an incredible story. There was an Israeli from one of these Tzafon Tel Aviv type people who were like as fry as they come, fried out of their brains. Remember, total. And they got married. For some reason, I don't know why people get married today, but these kind of people that got married, fried people. But the condition that tonight could the Lamaisa was no children. And everyone knows children get in the way. Children aren't paying. We need children. Modern people, we need children. Anyway, no children. The guy comes to New York on business, Israeli, and he has a friend who's like, whatever, on the way, getting involved, traditional. Because you're in New York, you have to go to the Rebbe for dollars. Sunday morning. What? When? Where? The guy's totally right. Okay, good. Make the guy happy. He went to $1. The Rebbe gives him $1, and then the Rebbe takes out $2, and the Rebbe says, this is for the tefillin, the tumim, the twin. Looking at the Rebbe like, what? The agreement of the marriage was no children. Anyway, Akitzur Mais, he goes back, and guess what? The wife is expecting. Again, has the twin. Next year he goes back again. A few years later he goes back. Again, guy schleps into dollars, right? They give him $1. And it's for the other child, next child. The guy's like shocked out of his mind. He's like, what in the world's happening here? And he came back, and his wife is expecting again. He had the third child. A few years passed, and again he's in New York, and again his friend schleps him $2. And again the Rebbe gives him $1 for bracha v'atzlocha, like everybody else in the queue. And before the Rebbe could say any further, Rebbe genug, speak, stop, enough, right? So the Rebbe looked at him. The Rebbe said, "It's not my bracha that's caused you to have the children. It's your wife's tefillas. The tefillas that your wife davens b'shas adlokas neder Shabbos kodesh. That's what cleanses. I only help facilitate what your wife do. For the life of him, he's never in his life seen his wife light Shabbos candles. What? When? Where? Who? He goes back to his wife, and now he's a kid. Do you light Shabbos candles? And you see her face turns the color of a tomato, of a beetroot, like she's mamish. And finally she has to tell her, her grandmother, whatever, probably. And somewhere she hides and she lights somewhere and surreptitiously Shabbos. When you light Shabbos candles, do you pray? Sort of sheepishly, yeah. Did you pray for children? Yeah. That's it. The point of the story is, it reminds me, there was a Belzer, whatever, the big, the Rechaim, the Sons of Roof, once had a story, a big tzaddik, whatever. There's Elter Bacher already, he was a very Dohivina person, he was Elter Bacher. So they asked him, why did you get married? He says, why should I want to get married? He says, because they're missing the Torah to have children. You want to have children, you're right a kvittel, you go to the Belzer Roof, what do you need a wife for? So you look at this guy, he's a maniac, with all due respect, writing a letter to the Belzer Roof doesn't give you children, you need a wife. And the Chaim told the story because what he wanted to say was, the Rebbe could send you the greatest brach. There's a tite from the Trisker. Ani Hashem lo yishanisi. The Eibishter hasn't changed. He's still in the miracle-making business. Aber va'atem b'nei Yankiv lo yichilisem, Yidden haven't made the kid. Our job, the Rebbe shik brachas. Our job is to make kelim for the Rebbe's brachas. There was once a chassid of Rameir Primish Laner. He was a very handy man with crafts. And the Rameir Primish Laner ordered by him before Pesach 100 wooden spoons for his archim. He made it. And the Rebbe thanked him. He didn't want to take any repayment. Rameir Primish Laner called in his Rebbetzin to make Tzedel Aderech for this guy on the way journey back to his shtet. The Rebbe, I don't want him to the Rebbetzin. And Rameir Primish Laner was insistent. I'll send you Tzedel Aderech. And he didn't want to take from the Rebbe's house Tzedel Aderech. He didn't. Anyway, he thanked the Rebbe, thanked him, went home, he wished him a Chakar Samech, went home, everything is fine and dandy. A few months later, suddenly, financially, he had an unglück, a crash, and he lost all his money. And he went to Prim Mishlan, back to the Rebbe, and he asked him for a brach. And the Mayor Prim Mishlan said, I'm really sorry. I wanted to give you parnoso. Was for you zera zaracha until bias Hamashiach. I offered you it, and you refused the bracha that I gave. The Rebbe sent us brachas. Right? There's a story told. I said last night. I was bringing last night in Karnait somewhere. There was a elder bacher was having problems finding a shidduch. Unfortunately, in today's generation, it's quite common. And someone offered him with matzia as a shidduch, and he wrote to the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Bali Lula, and he told him to go for it. It's massive. He went, he met them with Duberes, Kama v'Kama Pa'omim, and there's no one else with any mazel tov, so he got a bit, whatever. Punkt, he meets the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Frierdiker Rebbe asked him, like, Makara, what happened with the shidduch that we discussed, we talked about? So then he went out, they met. From his side, he was very masculine. But the woman hasn't made up her mind. She's still keeping him in suspense. He's hanging in the air. He doesn't know what she will decide. But the Frierdiker Rebbe said, you don't understand. The Gemara says, at the beginning of Soita, that Arboim Yoim Kodim Yitziras Havlad, 40 days before a soul descends in the world, the Baskel is Machra, the heavenly celestial voice cries out, Bas Pleni Lepleni. This be'emes is your shidduch. It's your zivik. It's half of your soul. Nevertheless, the last time that neshama saw the other half, you are reina, pure, pristine neshama in Ginzim Reim. And suddenly a neshama came down in this world, and it's vapatchkit a bissel. And therefore she doesn't recognize you. You'll do a bit in avodah, you'll do a bit in whatever, and a bit of tshuva, a bit of whatever. You'll wipe away a bit of the grime, a bit of the grease, a bit of the mud that's been accumulated. She'll recognize you in Kachava, and they got engaged, and they lived, let's say, in Hollywood, happily ever after. The moral of the story is, Rabbi Yisai, that when we're Zoiche, v'sechazena inenu, the Melech b'yofi, techazena inecho, the Rebbe should be able to recognize all of us. That means we live our lives personally. Everyone's a cheshbon, and if I would be a chosted every minute of the day, 24/7, what the Rebbe wants of me at this moment, I'd look totally different. But I'll go upon him the major events in our life. Once a week, once a month, Erev Rosh Chodesh, Erev Shabbos, whatever. Think to myself, what have I done in this Meshach Zman to be goyim the Rebbe Ashtikul Nachasur? The house that I have, is this a house that the Rebbe comes tomorrow to Muncie in my address? Will the Rebbe walks from room to room in my house? Is the Rebbe going to be happy? There was once in Kfar Chabad, there was the Rav, Shneur the Rav, went to someone's house to see for a gemach. He used to have a gemach to get the money, whatever. He walked into a house and he looks at the bookshelf, and he says, "In this house, the Rav in Kfar Chabad, Shneur, he says, in this house you can't say hal." You can't say hal. The Gemara says on Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, you don't say hal. Why don't you say hal? Efshir Sifrei Chaim v'Sifrei Amesim Psuchim U'Fonu v'Eirim Hal. There's the book of life, the book of death, open, right? How could you say hal? Now look at this bookshelf. You could imagine, you could extrapolate this to many other things in one's house. Is this a house where the Rebbe would walk from room to room? The Rebbe would be happy. Rebbe Tzishentiv, one of the great Chassidim, used to always say that Amol, the Sharf Chassidim from Amol, in benching, they would add a line in the Rachman. He used to say a line, Harachman hu yivorech es adinenu mereinu v'rabeinu balabayis. The house that I'm establishing, what's in it, the way I fear Zechar Shabbos Suda, by a Fabrengen, by davening, is this the kind of house that the Rebbe would have nachas? You know, the Rebbe Marash once said, there are three types of shaitan, three types of fools. There's a fool, you shake hands, shalom aleichem. You never, I come to Muncie, right? You meet people, shalom aleichem. There's a type of shaitan, within 2 seconds, the shalom aleichem, you know the guy's a fool. Shaitan. There's another person who makes rational conversation. In the course of the conversation, you see, takashay. There's another guy who has a rational, cogent, lucid discussion. Seems incredibly shafui. He's insane, a normal person, entirely intelligent person. Then at the end of a lengthy conversation, he gets into a rage, slams the door, he's takamashi. Who's the biggest Michigan of all? The guy who's out and out in the first flick, is he the Michigan? He's not Michigan. The real Michigan is the guy at the end. You put up a facade of being normal for so long. The last minute you have to spoil it. If we've gone through so much, I remember Mendel Wechter said after Gimel Tammuz, in the French Secret Service, there was a whole endurance test. They only take a large intake of people who want candidates for a certain position, elite corps, and then one job after the other, and one endurance test after another. And most of the incompetents were weeded out in the select corps. And the final test, they take you to a canyon, jump off the cliff. Jump off the cliff. So I'm going to say, as much as I'm a patriot and loyal to the and a few guys, they taka jumped. And some mechanism came, and the last minute they saved. Said, how taka were you willing to be Meister Nefesh? Right? This posh. I don't believe the French government would invest so many years of training, so much money for this special elite corps, and at the end of the day, the last thing throw you off a cliff. If you understand what for 2,000 years he didn't have been through in a gulf, and you understand the history of Chassidus Chabad, and after all of this event, right, and we're holding the last minute, only a royal Michigan is not gonna, the last minute, 1 minute to midnight, is not gonna do what we gotta do. I'm gonna tell you, Rabbi, like I said, there is a fine shliach in South Africa. It was Mendel Lipsker. And when he was going to his own shliach, in those days it wasn't like today where there's 4,000, 5,000 shluchim around the world. The big major move going to New York, going to South Africa, Johannesburg, was Amid B'Shmom in those days. So he was preparing. Eventually he's going to move. So punkt he met Rabbi Chodakov. Just met it, bumped into him. And Rabbi Chodakov says, "Nu, how are your achonas going?" Hashem, he bought the refrigerator, bought the washing machine, the containers going on this date. I'm not speaking about the Gashmi, the Ruchni. So what's your plan? When you get to Johannesburg, to South Africa, what's your plan for your shlichus? So Mendel Lipsker says, I envisage that when I'm going to go there, I'm going to sit with the Rabbonim, with the Askonim, people who Kuram the Chabad, and we'll sit and we'll derive some strategy. We'll design a strategy of what is going to be the goal, the ambition of Chabad in South Africa. So Rabbi Chodakov told him, I had the story. I was on the ship with the Friediger Rebbe coming from Russia, to America, in Tovshin. And one day the Friediger Rebbe was sitting on the deck of the ship, and he called Rabbi Chodakov, and he said, "What's our plan? What are we doing when we're arriving to America?" Rabbi Chodakov said, "We'll speak to the Rabbonim, the Askonim, and we'll get a pulse, see what's happening there, and then we'll decide." So the Friediger Rebbe said, "Oy bazoi, if that's the way we're going to work, we'll end up with an American Yiddishkeit, not a Hamish Yiddishkeit." And he told Rabbi Chodakov to get a paper and pen, and he began to take dictation. And the Friediger Rebbe wrote the whole plan of Lubavitch in America. What is the goal, the ambition, the dream? What are the aspirations of Lubavitch in America on the deck of the ship over the Atlantic Ocean? And then Rabbi Chodakov went into his breast pocket, and he took out an old yellowed piece of paper, and he showed it to him. And he said, this is like a ma'aseh from the Chassid, a day doesn't go by that I don't read this piece of paper that was dictated to me by the Rebbe Rayatz on the deck of the ship going to New York. What is our dictation? The Rebbe gave us a maimer, or Bossi Legani, which this denotes what is our avodah in our generation. I want to say, one of the amazing things, but the Rebbe's Bossi Legani, Tafshin Aleph, I don't claim competent expertise of Chassidus, but I've never seen a maimer where there's stories of every Rebbe. And all the stories revolve around one nekuda, the Avos Yisrael of the Rebbe, of each of the Rebbeim, of Rabbi Seinu Zienu, the Avos Yisrael. Gerade, someone pointed out, one of the Mashrim, I forget who, maybe Rabbi Lesher, someone will tell me. The story is like that. When the Alter Rebbe, the Maisa, is in the middle of Yom Kippur davening, he suddenly takes off his talus and he goes to chop wood for a mialetz. Feel it, yeah? The Mittler Rebbe is the Safar Aral Besari for the Chatzos Nuruv. The Tzemach Tzedek is Vani Tzedek Echse Punech. Rebbe Marash is younger man, Yain Esech is Matam, yeah? Someone asked a simple question. If you want to bring stories of the Etzem Mesiras Nefesh of the Rebbeim, which are Avos Yisrael, the Alter Rebbe gave away his whole nedunya, that Yidden should be able to have a parnosa, they should be able to have agricultural settlements, etc. The Tzemach Tzedek was arrested 22 times. The Tzemach Tzedek went to Peterburg with the Tachrichim in his suitcase. Right? That Taka Mesiras Nefesh for Toiv of Kol Yisrael. It's not Maisi, he gave halvo before that. Those part. So one of the Mashpiyim pointed out what's unique about this. What did the Rebbeim were Mesiras Nefesh? With the Avos Yisrael to Kol Yisrael. It's very easy to have a love affair with 10,000 people. To love Kol Yisrael. The stories the Rebbe chose were the Mesiras Nefesh of the Rebbeim for a yochid, for an individual. That's the Yizkar Avosov Yichye Zarim that we say on Davening. There's a chassid in Houston, Texas. Many of you know him, Shimon Lazarov. Very interesting, colorful personality. He came to New York, Yud Beis Tammuz, Tov Mem Aleph, with a few of his Gvirim. He was sitting in a restaurant with one of his Gvirim, who knows what's going on in Lubavitch, the world of Lubavitch. And he tells him, Shimka, you think you're fooling yourself. Mele in the Yuds, Mele in the Chofs, in the 50s, in the 60s. Lubavitch had a very small oilam. So versteht sich, the Rebbe is able to keep track of everybody. Heintige Zeiten, the number of Lubavitchers in the world has grown exponentially. It's incredible. Do you really think the Rebbe knows you, Shimka Lazarov, in Houston, Texas? Impossible. It's not humanly possible to keep track of so many different people. And Shimka got fed up and he's very just walked off in a huff. He's very disturbed by this. But it bothered. The comment was eating and it bothered it. It was bugging him. And later by the Fabrengen, he's standing by the Rebbe by Fabrengen. Remember where he used to stand? Right? And the comment of this Gvir, because Kesef Yana Azus, right? Kesef, whatever. It was a Chsidish Fabrengen, a small, I'll tell you, income between. He said, and suddenly it's bothering him. Maybe Taka the Gvir is right. Efsher Fort. And he's lost in thought. And suddenly he feels that every eye in 770 is upon him. Right? And the Rebbe looked at the Rebbe called Shimke, warfa weg dein Marisch Chöre und soll lechaim auf Akosmo. Throw away your melancholy, depression, your crackerjack thoughts. Say lechaim. I'll tell you, when I came to Tervadas, from Tervadas to Lubavitch, I was learning for Chabad, and my brother decided to follow my footsteps to become a Lubavitcher, and he was becoming bar mitzvahized. And American parents asked their sons, what would you like to be bar mitzvah present? A car, I don't know what I want. So my brother said, I would like to have Yechidus by the Rebbe. Okay, my parents took him to the Rebbe. So my father, Olav Shalom, told the Rebbe, do you realize that we have a son who learns in Lubavitch? My older son learns in Lubavitch. And the Rebbe said, with a big smile, yeah, Kfar Chabad. And it blew my father away. He wasn't a Lubavitcher. How in the world does he know, does he keep track of 20 billion chassidim all over, everyone's learning at every one time? And after that one-line comment to the Rebbe, I never had sorrows again being a Lubavitcher. It just blew his mind away. My wife had a grandfather. He was offered, a Gera Chassid from the Hague. He was offered a job in the Tafshin Ches Zayin to be a sheikh in Charleston, South Carolina, which is in the middle of nowhere. That's the Yid. The Shaila was, what's the chinuch of his kids? It's very difficult. It's not easy. The Ger Rebbe, the Emes, was in Eretz Yisrael. It was warriors in Eretz Yisrael. He wasn't contacted. Aber to take as achrayas of moving a family to Alish Ratyoran, and he couldn't take it on his own places. Not fragen by Akutari, by somebody. The Babich Rebbe's in New York last. He went into the Frierdiker Rebbe, right? To get. And Rabbi Simpson, who was the Rebbe's Gabbai at the time, he says the Rebbe's not feeling well today. He's not taking anyone in. Can't get it. And he's a Gerach Hever. Look like the linebackers of the 40s, the Green Bay Packers. They're like heavy Hever. Like, you don't mess with them, right? So he started arguing. Rabbi Simpson, and finally, he in disgust, he leaves, he storms out of 770, and suddenly Rabbi Simpson comes running after him breathlessly. The Rebbe remembers your voice from Paris. He told me to let you in. Makara. A decade before, he was living in Paris. And the previous Rebbe, the Balei Lula, wasn't well. And he needed to go to professors, to doctors, to deal with his medical condition. So Zalman Schneerson, was a family of the Rebbe, got a telegram from Chatzah Fagin that the Rebbe is coming to Paris b'chashoy, incognito, without anyone knowing that he's there. And therefore he wants no one to know about it, but you're to pick him up by the train station, to bring him to the doctor, the professor, and accompany him, bring him back. Nichte b'tzida, if you can't personally do it for whatever reason, send somebody else, a replacement, aber nicht k'famanash, not a lubavsh. He couldn't, Taka was not well, so he sent my wife's grandfather. They picked him up from the train station, the Frierdiker Rebbe, brought him to the doctor, waited, brought him back. By the Polish, have a minig, gutrira, tzadzik, gemask. So he told him his name. Nishkan Gruise Teures. Yoel ben Chaya Genendel. Akoy. 5 words. 5. Yoel ben Chaya Genendel. Akoy. 10 years later, he's in New York. And he's arguing with Rabbi Simpson, and he wants to go in. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says, oh, I remember the voice, I owe him a favor, let him in. Hello? How do you understand the story? Pshat is he had a photographic memory. Good decor. The truth is, I always tell my Balabatim, we all have photographic memories, we don't bother developing the film. Right? The question is, what do you remember? Things that you care. Things that you care about, you remember. When you care deeply, right? The Rebbe said is that he's like the Rebbe's kinder. When the Rebbe, the first time the Rebbe gave a bracha Erev Yom Kippur, he's like the Rebbe's kinder. If you're a child, you're not forgotten. And epis what? We have to a bit pay back. Let's say l'chaim. We got what do we have to leave here? Not worried. I'm not paying for it. Right? The Iker. By the way, let me just tell you one thing. I asked Michiel. I sound very Morish to myself. One of the things that really was very, very incredibly tired by the Rebbe, incredibly tired, was Achtus Bachsid. You do it. Everyone knows that when the Rebbe was the Toshin Chavov, when the Rebbe was speaking about the Tzemach Tzedek 100 years. And the Rebbe spoke about the Tzemach Tzedek when he went to Peterburg, and his Poshim Tishlechayev Mineged, and his life was in danger. And the beautiful Volozhiner, who was coming as a representative of the Eilimische world, Stagnische world, he asked the Tzemach Tzedek, how was he putting his life at jeopardy? Who's he leaving all the Chassidus to? So he said there are sons, there are sons, and there's also the Achtus Chassidim that will lead us to Mashiach, etc. That will keep Chassidus going. The Rebbe said, Heintigadar, the first Indian doesn't apply. The Rebbe is incredibly tired, right? That Chassidim get on. I was speaking to one of the Rabbanim here before. The Rebbe said a line which, when it plunges like a dagger in your heart, there was a certain place, shall remain nameless, which had machlokes amongst Anash. And the Rebbe wrote a Zettel. Afternoon, that time, Katzti b'chaye b'bnei ha'machloik. You understand what that means? By the Rebbe, machlokes was mutzamach was mis. And Freer, whatever. and Avos Yisrael, when people care for each other, when there's a community, a minyan is not pshat. That it's a bus queue. You're waiting in a line. Everyone goes to a different destination. And people who daven together, right? Pshat is inextricably their destinies, what's happening to them, right? Is inextricably linked to each other. And the Eibush should help that we should build communities for every shul in every Lubavitch and Bismedish in itself. And all of the shuls in Muncie together, you have to care about each other. If someone's missing something and you're davening, and the member of Anash, and you're davening in that shul and you're unaware of it, or a person lives for himself, the care you do for others is the rent that you pay for your place on planet Earth. Right? I always tell my Balabatim, the will to live is animal. Every living organism instinctively wants to exist. The will to let live is human. The will to help live, that's divine. That's a divine quality. The Eibush Helfen, Anash, people who have one father, right, who unites us, who's the glue that unites us. The best way of expressing an avo. There's a famous story, because I'll say it's Menschstadt. There was a king, and the king accused the person of a crime. It was a capital offense. And another fellow says, it wasn't him who did it, I did it. Kill me. There's no, I did it. Each one, there was such balipta friends, so close. That each one wanted to take the rap, take the blame. Abiya's friend gets off the hook. And when the king saw the ava between these two chaveirim, he said, you know what? Forget about the gzeira. I want to be a threesome. I want to be to share in this chavrishas. Whenever there's love, whenever there's care, whenever there's devotion, right? That's where the Rebbeim bring down, they evoke their compassion. I mean, the Eibush to help. I haven't been to Muncie. It's the first time in Muncie in about 41, 42 years, I reckon. Since I was a bocher. Last time I was in Muncie, I was in the Bank of Kamenetsky's basement. Right? Many moons ago. Right? The Eibush help. I'm just see Anash here. I have to work together, to be poiled Rebbe's in Yonim and Shtar, to be Meifitz Chassidus, to bring to be, in the Meister with the Shmuel Munkus, hanging upside down from the Alter Rebbe's, outside the Alter Rebbe's house, right? Like a fish store, the fish. Every one of us, whether you like it or not, whether you deserve it or not, you're the merchandise of Lubavitch. You're the merchandise of Tikkun Tevim. The Eibush should help us, whether we like it or not. People look at us. We should be a seimel, a dugmachaya of what it means to be a chosid. For ourselves, for our children, for whatever. For the whole community. L'chaim, l'chaim. Dingen. Ja. The Saratella, the everything should be discovered after I've been looking at it.
I'll borrow it, yeah? While he sings the Nigunim.
Do me a favor. Speak as long as you want.
Tari di da da ya da la ya la 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 ya la 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 li di ma ya ya di da da ya da la ya la di di ya la ya la ya la li di ma la ya di da da ya da la 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 li di ma la 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 ya da la ya 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 di da da ay 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 la ya da ya ya la 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 ya da da ya da ya 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 la ya la 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 ya la 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 ay la ya da da ya la 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 di ma la 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 ya la 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 di ma la ya da da na la 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 di la la ya da la 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 ya da ya da la 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 ah ya da la ya la 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 da ya da la 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 ah ya la 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 di ma la ya da da ma da la ay la la ay da ay la 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 di ma da ya da da ma da la ay la 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 ay ya da ya 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 da da ay la 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 ay ya da ya ya la 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 ya da da ya da la 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 ya la 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 di da da ya la 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 di ma la la da ya la 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 di ma la ya da da ma la 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 di la la ya da la ya la 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 ya da ya da la 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 ya da la ya la 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 ya da la ya la 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 ay la 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 di ma la ya da da ma la la ya la di ma la la ay la ya la 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 di da ya da la ya la di ma la 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 na ya da ya ya la 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 ya da 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 ya 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 la la ya la 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 ya da la ya da da ya da ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 di ma la ya da da la 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 di ma la la ya la 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 di ma la ya da tra la 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 di ma la 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 ya la ya 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 la 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 ya la 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 di ma la ya ya la ya 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 la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 di ya la ya 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 la 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 ya la ya 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 la la ay la ya 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 la la ya 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 di ma la 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 di ma la 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 ya la ya ya na ay ya 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 la ya la ya ya la ya ay ya ya la ya la ya ya na ya 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 na ya la ya ya ay la ya 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 la 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 di la 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 ay la ya 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 la 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 ya la 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 ay la ya 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 la ya ya la ya 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 la 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 ay 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 didim ay lay 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 ay lay 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 didim ay lay 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 ay lay ay lay ay 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 lay ay lay ay lay ay ay lay ay lay ay lay ay ay lay ay ay la 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 I did it, I la 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 la. Did it, I la 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 la. I did it, I la 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 la. Did him. I la did him. I la 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 la. Ya la. Oh, ya da ya, oh ya da ya, da ya, ya da ya, ya, oh ya da ya, da.
Chaim. One of the inyanim that one has to be ma'orer Yitzhak is pasha the idea of learning the Rebbe's Torah is learning Chassidus, Kachi and Chassidus. It's famous that when the Tanya was first printed and it was brought to Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, he exclaimed, he can't understand how you fit such a great, awesome, infinite God in such a small little book. What's the pshat? If you think about it on a much deeper, profound level, all of Chassidus Chabad is a paradox. The Eibush is infinite, is Ein Sof, and you're trying to intellectually, in Chochmah, Bina, Vadas, trying to understand something which inherently is unknowable. You're trying to really do the impossible. It's actually a story which is told. Rabbi Yoel told over part of the story. It's much deeper, it's a very deep story. There was a Yid called Reb Sholem Shachna of Drovich, who was the son of the Malach, who was the Einikel of the Maggid, and was the father of the Holy Ruzhiner. People perhaps don't know a lot about him because he passed away at a rather young age. But when he heard that Alter Rebbe was in prison, for 53 days of the imprisonment, he was pushing Meirish Olam as he had fasted, he did whatever Rebbes do, Meirish Olam. Suddenly he walks into his Besmedrash one day, and he declares publicly that Rav is Aros. Alter Rebbe is out of the prison. And in those days before instant communication, no one had a clue, but eventually there's Nizbar. The Taka Alter Rebbe came out of jail at that very moment. They asked him afterwards, how could he possibly know that Rav is Aros? So Sholem Shachna of Provich said, I'll tell you, it says a Zoyer of Parshas Vayechi. I'm not going into the whole lumdus actually, this whole sugya. There's a keshes, as we learn in Parshas Noach. There are actually three types of keshes. There's a type of keshes that says in the Zoyer that will be seen when Mashiach comes. And he said on that particular day, Yutzis Kislev, he saw that keshes. The keshes, the Zoyer says, were the Simon Mashiach comes. And therefore he thought, look, Mashiach is here, but he looks around and Mashiach is not here. So what possible explanation could you have for that omen? It must be that Rav is Aros. Alter Rebbe is out of prison. That's where your Beil tells the story. But there's in Rishon Svarim, it tells the story just with another kvetch, that he sent a letter to Alter Rebbe and he told him about what he saw in the keshes, in this rainbow. And he wrote to Alter Rebbe, a simon, what I'm telling you is right, that when you were in prison and they came to tell you the Besura that you're going to be released, you were holding by the Pasuk Poda B'Sholem Nafshi. And originally you said it in the reversed order, B'Sholem Poda Nafshi, which was a simon on his intervention in heaven. And then you change it to Pada B'Shalom. So you have to say, what's pshat in the story? How in the world, what does it mean, right? That the Keshes, which is seen by Mashiach, by the coming of Mashiach, was seen on the day the Alter Rebbe got out of jail, and then, Afonso Mayonas just started. There's another similar story, also awesome in Meridik. Rabbi El tells the story that once he walked up to Fabrengen on Shabbos, and the Chassidim were arguing by the Fabrengen. Everyone knows that the Baal Shem Tov always kaching in the fact that the Alter Rebbe had a neshama chadosh, a new neshama. Right? Now, how do you understand? What does it mean to have a new neshama? I'm a simple person. I always understood neshama chadosh means that all our neshamas were kol and Adam Arishan. They were all kol in different parts of Adam Arishan. Some come from the head, the mind, some from the torso, the heart, some come from different evorim. And we know that our generation, which is the last generation before Mashiach, we're called Ikvus of the Mashiach because we come from Adam Arishan's heel. The Mashal is Yedua that Moshe Rabbeinu came from the Kone of Adam Arishan, and therefore he didn't, he didn't actually yinen from the Chet Eitzadas, but he was still a shafat. He was Onam Mikol Adam, because Moshe Rabbeinu said, Lo Yish Dvoram Anechi, he should have been Mechiach the other parts of Adam Arishan from eating from the forbidden fruit. But afterwards, although all neshamas were included in Adam Arishan, eventually the neshamas comes down, and it comes down, and it comes down until it finds its tikkun. It's Gilgul after Gilgul. Very often, if you want to understand the Shver, Sugyas, and Agadata in Shas, if you understand who is a Gilgul of whom, suddenly all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle fit together, and everything becomes understood. Let's do a derech klal that Rebbe brings very often from the Rebbe Marash, who brings from two places in Kisvei Arizal, our generation, B'derech Klal, previously in the Chaim Vital writes, one of the signs that Mashiach is about to come is when women demand equal rights. What does equal rights, women's lib, got to do with Mashiach? Very simple. But it says that because of the Chet of Adam Arishan, which is actually two things, a lack of emunah, and he was poigim, and therefore the neshamas had to come down again. And they came down in the form of the Der HaMabul, which it's the Nisoyin of Arayis, of Kedusha. Yishus is called Balsaras Darkei. And then it came down in the Chet of the Der HaFloga, which is Begam and Emunah, right? And then those neshamas of those generations came down again in Mitzrayim, of the Der Mitzrayim. And if the Jews wouldn't have sinned in the Chet Egel, then Moshe Rabbeinu would have been Mashiach. We would have gone straight from Bar Sinai to Eretz Yisrael. Moshe would have built the Beis HaBechira, and that would have been the end of history. So what happened here? The menfolk in building the Egel Azov messed up, and the Zuama of the Chet Eitzadas returned to mankind. And therefore the women know this subliminally, and therefore the women before Mashiach, and these generations, the Ramabel, the Raflogo, with the same Nisyonis, which was the Der Day, the Der Yotzei Mitzrayim, come down again, B'dora Basra, in the time of Mashiach, which is why our generation faces unprecedented nisyonis, especially in these two kavim, Kedush V'Tara and of Emunah. Why it says in Sforim that before Mashiach comes, being an Elech Yid will be as difficult as it was for Avraham Avinu to bring up his Ben Yochel at the Akedah. As one tzaddik once said, they able to take a rope and have one malach on one side, another malach on the other side, and the angels will shake the rope very violently, and only people of great, great faith will be able to hold on. And if anyone ever says to you in Muncie or wherever you are that you're a little minority, or just like the Lubavitchers, you tell them there's a Kabbalah from Shom Lezer Atzvet to Hashem Yinkum Damav, the son of the Bechayim, that before Mashiach comes, 95% of Torah and mitzvahs will be in the hands of the Samachman. Chiddush wegen Freier, Chiddush wegen whatever. Unsere heimische, 95% hands of the Samachman. All kinds of gefährliche nisyonis in this generation. Very few people, only people who have a chazik and munah will be able to hold on tight. It applies to all of us, right? Because our generation are gilgulim of those previous generations. So the chiddush of the neshama chadasha is that it never has been here ever since Adam Arishan. It never neshama hasn't been in this world. That's how I always understood ba'onyi what a neshama chadasha. Suddenly the Alter Rebbe in Shir Hashirim, Taf Nun, There the Alter Rebbe says there's another sug of Neshama Chadosha. There's a sug of Neshama Chadosha. It wasn't even included in Adam Rishon. Never. You know, the pagam of the Eitz Hadas, which brought a zuama in Adam Rishon in the yeah. No problem. This is not a monologue. This is a dialogue. What is the meaning of this Kabbalah from the Holy Ratzveter? Yeah, I'm also trying to understand. Okay. What happens if you have a super glatt kosher piece of meat? The cow or shtamel, the cow spoke Yiddish, I don't, whatever, it's mamish super kosher. When I was a kid, I must tell you, I shouldn't be rude. When I was a kid, I went once, I don't know if anyone's of my generation or the older generation, antiques, right? You're, okay? When I was a kid, Cholamoyed, our outing always used to be, Cholamoyed Pesach, we used to go to Palisades Amusement Park. This used to be an amusement park, Palisades Amusement Park. No offense to anybody here, right? Just speaking about Chitzonius. I remember as a little kid, knee-high to grasshopper, I'm watching this Chassidish girl. Her father's wearing a Steimel with all the Shweina Begonim. And she's on the merry-go-round, little teeny girl. And she got very scared and she started crying. So the father went to help her, right? So the father sat on the little horsey on the merry-go-round next to her. For some odd reason, he felt very awkward to deal with the Steimel Weiss, in the works, right? And sitting on the pink horsey going around the merry-go-round. So he started to take off his Steimel, right? But then he realized the light started flashing, right? And he got to hold on to something, otherwise he'll be off the horse, right? He didn't know. He only has two hands. He's not an octopus. So he took the Steimel, he put it on the horse, right? And I was a little impressionable kid. And the merry-go-round started, and I'm watching this horse with the Steimel. I'm just watching it go round and round and round, right? It left an indelible picture in my mind. To this very day, I can see this picture of this horse with the Steimel. Right? So the point is, you can have a super kosher cow, right? Or Steimel, it's everything. And you super kosher it, and you traver it, everything is Kedas v'Chedin. And you put it in a treifa pot. You know what's going to happen? So, huadin, if a person is engaged in the most lofty, exalted activity, but their character, their whatever, is tainted, right? A person learns Torah. Learn Torah. And Taka, we have a principle, mitech shalei lishma, bo lishma, etc. But do you know the Rambam writes in the Tshuva that the whole mitzvah of Talmud Torah was only given lishma? And if you learn Torah shaloi lishma, that's not the mitzvah of Talmud Torah? Hello? You with me? Yeah? And fakert, on this it says, Loi zocha nas l'samamovis. It's a potion of death. A person is doing an exalted thing with the wrong motivation, right? Okay. I spent an hour answering your question. I'm not going to have to kick me out of this hole. Can I tell you a story? I really bring about this later. I'll tell you a story. You're the opposite, don't laugh. You know Manchester too well. A few years ago, there was a Lubavitcher fellow who kids getting bar mitzvahized. And in I don't have a Lubavitcher shul, but the bar mitzvah Suda was in my shul. To understand the story, you have to keep the story. And before he asked me to speak. It's a good chaver of mine, the father of the bar mitzvah. So before I was speaking, he sent his kid to another Lubavitcher Moiset. And before I was speaking, the Rosh Yeshiva, the Masista, whatever, was speaking. And he's a lovely person. I respect him greatly. We get on very well. But he's, what you'd call in today's politically correct lexicon, he's chassidically challenged. He's chassidically challenged. The other fellow. He's a nice man, but he's whatever. He doesn't know much about chassidically. So he's addressing a Lubavitcher Bochel, and he wants to give him a message to take away from his bar mitzvah. So he tells him the following story. In Yerushalayim, there was a big tzaddik called Aryeh Levin. You've heard of him. The tzaddik of Yerushalayim. Very dahimini, very special. What? Tzaddik in our time. The Shver of Rav Eliyash. Rabbi Knapp. So Rav Aryeh Levin had a minig that Erev Yom HaKodesh, he'd take his children to various Gedolim, Tzaddikim, Rabbanim, whatever, to get brachos. Erev Yom HaKodesh. So the Litvish Rosh Hashiva is telling this Bachar, this Bar Mitzvah boy, that Rav Aryeh Levin one year took his Ben HaBachoyer. His name was Chaim Yankiv, an 8-year-old. And he took him to one of the Gedolei Yerushalayim. It was called the Krinik Rav. He was a Rav in Krinik in Lita. Ram Kana Sender Shapira. What? That's someone else. Okay, whatever. Okay, the Rav. You're right. And he had to go again. He asked him for a bracha. Yeah, okay. And he told him to have to go again. You're right. And he told him to in a Geben Agish. He told him in his city in Krinik there was a Wasserträger, a water carrier. You can't get a lowlier, more backbreaking profession than being a water carrier, right? And the guy got fed up, and he came to the Rav, and he asked him for an eitzah, and he wants to learn. He has a nafki choshka b'teira. He told him, give a geshrei 3 times out loud. Ich will werden a godel, right? And Kachave, and he gave up his water carrying, and he became a yeshiv oil, and he had stark hatzlocha, and learning, and parnos, and lived happily ever after. So the Krinik Rav told this boy, Chaim Yankov Levin, who's the son of Aryeh Levin, as a schreien dreimal, ich will werden a godel. Right? Erev Yom Kippur, Erev Yom HaKodesh, the Shari Shemayim are open, right? And he didn't do it, right? And therefore, it's gornish geworden for him. He became a nobody, a classified nobody. And so the Rosh Hashiva said to this Bachar, old Bar Mitzvah Bachar, today's the Bar Mitzvahs, Neitz Rossen, the Shari Shemayim are open, give a geshrei 3 times, ich will werden a godel. Right? That was his bracha, his eitzah to the Bar Mitzvah Bachar, he sat down. I'm the next speaker. Hello? Yeah, you're listening to me? He's hated Chorlish. First of all, you should know, by Chassidim, right? By definition, someone once wrote to the Rebbe a letter. Dear Rebbe, right? I am fed up with my life. I'm at the end of my tether. Every time I get up in the morning, I don't know what to live for. I try to daven, to 8 minutes, I try to learn. I'm at the Avedetzot, Rativ, help, SOS. The Rebbe didn't answer the letter. The Rebbe took a red pen, and he circled the first word in every sentence, which was I. If you ever notice, sin in English is spelled S-I-N. Inside of every sin, you know what letter stands there? I. As the Mechaz Lodge Taich, Anoichi Oimid Ben Hashem Lekechem Lechem. The ich, the ego, the self, that is the barrier to the Eden. Right? You know what the first chet of the world was? The Eitz Hadas. You know what happened to Eitz Hadas? Rabbi Yonasan says in Yanas Dvash, Adam Arishan was born with the same milas of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Vatachsareu ma'at melikim." He was masig mem tes sharibina. 49 gates of understanding. The 50th level he was missing. Yeah, came along the Nochosh and said, "Vatachsareu ma'at melikim." Chap the feet from the Eitz Hadas, vayisim kelikim. You'll chap around the nunshar, the full nunshar ribin. And he did so, right? And therefore the Mekubalim say Adam Arishan was poigim in the 2 dalits. The dalit of the Shem Adnai and the dalit of Shem Shedal Yud. And as someone pointed out, I'm going to read, if you take the dalit out of Adnai and dalit out of Shedal Yud, you know what you're left with? Yesh and Ani. The Soid HaNochosh Ishi Ani, which is the letters of Yesh and Ani. Ich, self, ego, that is the source of all churban, of all zuam, of all tumah in the world. Right? So when the Shiva tells this Bacharol, right? Ich will werden a godel, right? I did not like the message, I must tell you. It's like vomit. It's like muktzah machus mitz. So I'm getting up to speak, next one. So I have to say, this kid who you say became a nobody because he couldn't shrei ich will werden a godel, I happen to have known him. He was my sandik. And my bris. He was Mesilas Kedushin by my parents' chasana. And I'll have you know that when he grew up in Yerushalayim, and he went to Itzchayim, Rabbi Zalman said on him that he's b'shich milamayla gavoya from all his chaverim l'safsel and his kita, which included Rabbi Shlomo Zalman and Rabbi Yoshev and Gedolei Yerushalayim. And when his father, Rabbi Aryeh, finally fulfilled his promise to his Rebbe when he left Europe to go to Eretz Yisrael, he promised to Baruch Ber his Bechor will send back to Eretz Yisrael. He sent him back to Baruch Ber, right, in Kamenetz, and he becomes known as the Ili from Yerushalayim. And he was Baruch Ber's private chavrus, and every time you learn a Birka Shmuel, right, these are things that he was mislabin together with him. And when he wrote his first sefer in Hilchos Erechim and Rambam, which not many people in the world are very behaved in Hilchos Erechim and Rambam, right? He sent it to Baruch Ber from America, where he was Rav, right? Baruch Ber sat a whole night and went through cover to cover. In the morning, he took a minion of Bachrim, and he sat and made a kafah 7 times around the beam with the sefer. So I turned around to Rosh Hashiva and I said, if you would write a sefer, I would write a sefer. Believe me, Baruch Ber would not make a kafah around the beam. Elamai, why didn't you hear about him? Nobody. I'll tell you what. I was once in his house, but I thought like I read the art school revisionist history book. I saw it with my own eyes. I saw the telegram he got offering him the Rabbanus in Yerushalayim, to be Rav Rosh in Yerushalayim. And in the world of the rabbinate, being chief rabbi of Yerushalayim is second only to Holy Law in Manchester. This is like the top of the, you can't get higher, right? So I was always bothered as a kid. Why didn't he take on this job? And then I found out. What? Father was nothing. No. Father Mashgiach and Chaim Yeshiva. No. Why did Reb Aryeh Levin? Why did Reb Chaim Yankov Levin not come from Rav Roshi? He suddenly heard that there's someone else who's interested in the job. His name was Betzalel Zolti. I happen to know because he came to speak for the Mav Shakil in Melbourne, B'shai. And then he reminded himself that one year, in the wee hours of the morning, Reb Aryeh came home, and he told him he saw a lady darning socks by moonlight. And he asked the lady, what are you doing? It's 2 a.m. And she said she's an almona, and she has a son. And they say, Edu Lagoon, the Tiferes Yisrael, at Iluya Shekap. But every father, has to learn with their children, and there's no one to give them that extra push, that extra shtuk, that extra tuition. So she wants to get a koilinger man to learn with him, a few to pay him, a few piastra, and he'll be able. But V'la Roshen Kol doesn't have a penny. So she takes in people's falechete fashtunkene socks to darn them, to get a few extra pennies, to get a younger man, to help her son, that he should grow up and he should realize his potential. Chaim Yankiv Levine said, you know what? If this guy, this Betzalel Zolti, was Gehorovit through Azam Mesiras Nefesh from a Yiddish Mama, and he wants the job, I am not interested, in fact, he does not interested, come on. So I said, and what's Pshat? And his mother was Moshe Nefesh, and his parents weren't Moshe Nefesh for his atzloch in life. I said, I'll tell you what's Pshat. I said in my speech there in the Bar Mitzvah. In the olden days, when they printed a new chumash, there used to be the minig, and Yom HaVahim, used to be a sharblat. And in the sharblat was a gate, and in the gate on one side, used to traditionally draw a picture of Moshe Rabbeinu on one side, and Aaron HaKoyin on the other side. But the Maisa goes that once in the Chavrai Kadisha of the Chayzer, the court of the Holy Chayzer in Lublin, someone brought in a brand new truk of the chumash, and they see this artist, that's a Dreiter machine, a person out of his mind, off his rocker, and he drew a picture of Moshe Rabbeinu, tall, lanky, skinny type of guy, Langalokshin, and Aaron HaKoyin, short, fat, and dumpy. This artist is pushing, what's he smoking? Like, what's he on? What's his problem? What's the issue? The Bnei Yisrael said, I'll tell you pshat. The Gemara says in Aroy, everyone knows that Moshe Rabbeinu was 10 amas tall. Do you know how much 10 amas, Chaim Noach here, you know what 10 amas tall is? Double, triple NBA cent, right? The Idach Aaron had a Kindle de Menorah, right? Yutchas Tvachim, right? Hello? And a stepladder. Yeah? See, Al Korach Muzman, okay, couldn't put his hands higher than the tzitz, but still he must be a midget. So Al Korach Muzman Zogan, that Moshe was a giant, and Aaron was a midget. I tells us the Kasha, but Rashi says, who Moshe of Aaron, who Aaron the Moshe? Well, I'm Shkulim him. How can they be Shkulim if he's a giant and he's a midget? Al Korach Muzman Zogan, we're talking about volume. He was short, but long election, you know? And Aaron was short, but very fat and dumpy. But together, B'sachakol was Malam Shkulim. That everyone thought it's a tzachos, it's a bidus, a bedichas. That terrace feed, the Traver was sitting there. He said, "In der Wort liegt sich Rosen and Rosenberg." I said, "I have no idea what Rosen are. I'm the rabbi of Holy Law. I'm not the rabbi of Yeshivas. I'm a Kubol." But they're in simple pshat. There's a Moshe Rabbeinu who's an Ishalikim, who's in the heavens, who go up 40 days. Lechem lechalti mayim lishasiti. Himmelmensch, Ishalikim, and Aaron, whose greatness is what Oyev Shalom, Roidev Shalom. In other words, there's horizontal greatness and there's vertical greatness. Right? Put into direction. And this Rashi says, Malamed Sheshkulamik. It doesn't matter which direction, we have to be great. You know what I'm saying? That a person raises children and he's willing to be mavater on his own prestige and his own kovid and his own parnos and whatever. L'toivas atzveiten, that's Malamed Sheshkulamik, that's Gauss. I said the parents of this Chaim Yankov Levin, who lived a relatively unknown life, but this is the, I know him very, very well. This is the Hibani, right? That's not the end of the world. What a Yid says is, by us, in our dictionary, a Yid doesn't pray to be a God. A Yid prays to be an Uvid Hashem, to be an Ehrlich Yid. Do the Ratzon Hashem. I'm not Avdu the Kutchabrich, right? When a person doesn't, and all of his avodas Hashem becomes a means for his own, some people are chassidically challenged. How will the Eibishter find the Gan Eden big enough for a man like me? And they clear into this, they grapple and wrestle with this theological dilemma, and they realize ultimately the Eibishter Ein Sof, the Eibishter Kol Yochel, and is omnipotent, and he'll be able to create big enough Sharabor. And the point is, when a person's motivation is tainted, right, then it's to find a few Erlich, right, who are able to hold on to the Klamke, right, and to do the Ratzon Elyon, have that bittul and that self-effacement. That's what Chassidus is all about. Okay, l'chaim, l'chaim. Think what? Okay. Who? Yeah.